Sword of Coming Chapter 866. Fallen in the Mountains. The weather is refreshing. In the courtyard of a house there is almost no place to stay. There are many big bamboo woven eyeless sieves and big wicker dustpans, all covered with dried red peppers, red and bright. In the corridor under the eaves, Zhou Xian lay on a recliner, closed his eyes and shook his fan. Xianxia finished walking along the mountain trail today, so he came here to sit for a while. She likes to chat with Mr. Zhou, not only because Zhou Xian took her up the mountain and led her on the road of martial arts. On the Luopa mountain, Xianxia also regarded Mr. Zhou as the only elder of his family. The old man would often persuade her to go down the mountain more and go back to the home in Zhouqing to see her parents, saying that even if she is urged to marry, don't be impatient, let alone take Luopa mountain as a quiet place to hide. There are some things that can't be avoided, even if they can avoid the current troubles, they can't avoid future regrets. The most vain life in life is nothing but regret. The wanderer in a foreign land is the wandering paper kite. Only the longing in the heart becomes that thread. If a person has no nostalgia for his family and hometown, he really becomes a broken paper kite. Then all the joys and sorrows are separated from the original place and the grass is on the grass. The old man also said that Xianxia was lucky. It is actually only a few steps to go home from being so close to the hometown, but there are also worries about getting closer. The reason why Xianxia likes to talk to Mr. Zhou is probably because the old man speaks rationally and never pretends to be an elder. You must listen to the truth right away. Zhou Xian asked with a smile. Xianxia, how many punches have you accumulated over the years? Xianxia replied, as of the beginning of this year, 2 million punches were reached and then they stopped counting. Zhou Xian asked again, why don't you count it? Do you think it's boring to remember this, or do you suddenly forget it one day and then you don't bother to count? Xianxia said honestly, deliberately remember this. It is easy to be distracted when practicing boxing. It seems that practicing boxing is just for numbers. Zhou Xian nodded, that's good. The son once told me in private that when Miss Xin didn't deliberately remember the number of punches, it was when she entered the room. Xianxia said, Xianxia's talent in learning boxing is indeed much better than me. She had to pinch her nose to admit it. Zhou Xian asked, what else? Xianxia shook his head honestly and said, no more. Zhou Xian laughed and said, people I like and hate people I hate. It's circumstantial. But Xianxia is not stupid, he can understand. Xianxia explained, I don't hate Xianxia. Others are pretty good, but the first impression that year was a bit bad, which makes people really unlikable. Later on the mountain I didn't pay much attention to Xianxia. I know what to say when I meet. Understanding. Zhou Xian nodded. Xianxia, to be honest, the son has always been very optimistic about your boxing skills. If you don't know that you will not agree, you are worried that you will think more about what you have. I have accepted you as a direct disciple. Just like that Zhou Xian. This kind of optimism of the son does not think that you or Zhou Xian will have high martial arts achievements in the future, but just feel that the martial artist on the mountain is pure. There are two types, one is in the fist and the other is in the heart. The former is extremely fast in the upper body, understanding the principles of the fist and mastering the fist, while the latter is relatively inconspicuous, persevering and not caring about other people's views and sights. Xianxia was a little surprised and hummed softly, Xianxia's idea is pretty good. After Xianxia was sitting on the bamboo chair beside the corridor, Zhou Lian's hand swayed a little bit more. Zhou Lian smiled and murmured, the post willow yellow, the stream rises green, and people are like green hills and hearts like water. The green hills stand upright like strings and there are ins and outs. Life is isolated and absent-minded, so it hurts. Xianxia was slightly sad just listening. Zhou Lian turned his head and smiled, Yuan Bao likes Chao Sunny, right? Xianxia held back a smile and nodded. She likes Chao Qingqing very much, but she doesn't know how to speak. Anyway, every time Chao Qingqing is at the door to read the book, Yuan Bao will deliberately speed up and turn around to practice boxing. Zhou Lian continued, then Yuan Lai likes you secretly, do you secretly know? Xianxia blushed slightly, I know, but I don't like him. Zhou Lian put down the fan and whispered softly, it's hard for those who watch the sea to be the water, and those who are crazy are embarrassed. The pain and joy of love between men and women is just that the person in your mind becomes the person in memory, or the person in your heart becomes the person on the pillow. On the side of Xianxia, even if they are the same, what they say from Mr. Zhu Lao and Jing Daifeng's mouth is very different. One is a kind old man who has experienced vicissitudes of life, and the other is a nasty child who can't control his eyes. Fortunately, Zheng Dafeng is still guilty and has no guts and never treats her with sly. Sun Yunji suddenly said, "The mountain lord has gone out to swim again." Zhu Lian let out a hum and said slowly, "If one is busy, the world can be free." The number of shopkeepers in the two shops in Qilong Lane is increasing. Shi Rou, the treasurer of the New Year's Eve shop, and Zhou Junchen, nicknamed A Ho, had a white-haired boy named Huang Ho not long ago. The treasurer of the Chaotu shop next door, the blind old Taoist Jiaxing, the old of Longmen realm. In addition to a pair of master and apprentice, Zhao Denggao and Tianjie, there came another girl named Cui Peanut, who claimed to be Cui Dongshan's sister, and nearly laughed Qin Lingjun to death. Qin Lingjun finished chatting with his brother Bai at Xingting today, and then wandered all the way to the small town, walked into the New Year's Eve shop and greeted with a big smile, "Old sister Hong Ho." Qin Lingjun, who was nicknamed by Qin Lingjun as an old girl, is the ascended outer heavenly demon who looks like a child, and the Taoist companion of Wu Shuangjiang. For the time being, the white-haired boy is still an outer handyman disciple of Luopa Mountain, helping out at the shop here. It took a pseudonym for itself called Huang Ho. But how did Qin Lingjun know what level of this young and white-haired poor short winter melon is, what identity background he has and who his backing is? I only knew that it was the little girl's film that my master picked up on the road. Qin Lingjun had his own little abacus. When Pei Qian and Xiao Mili were brought back to the town by the master, they had no realm. At this moment, the white-haired boy was facing Qin Lingjun with a piece of cake in his mouth, holding two pieces in both hands and staring at a large piece in his eyes. "I am busy. There is no time to pay attention to the boy in Tsing-yi who is bluffing." Asha looked at the white-haired boy who was only slightly better than guarding and stealing. The child was quite grieving and he was no longer a dumb. "If you eat and eat, you will know how to keep accounts and keep a hammer." Just her point. "Salary, when can I make up the whole?" The mountain owner is just rich and not generous. He likes to come here to check the accounts every 3 weeks. In the end, it is not difficult for our shopkeeper to be a man. Amma is still angry. There is still a noise in the water and there is no sound when eating, so it's a skill. Sister Shi Rou was greedy for the dark every day and finally earned some money. She could have turned into a lot of scraps of money, but the result was good, and there was an unscrupulous person who became a debt figure on the account book. Besides, this little girl seems to have a problem with her brain. She often goes around alone in the backyard, raising her arms and shouting again and again, screaming, "Hidden official ancestor Megatron Jianghu, great martial arts. Hidden official ancestor, handsome Wushuang, invincible swordsmanship." Aha wanted to take her to see the doctor. At this moment, the white-haired boy heard the mute complaint. Instead of turning a deaf ear, he deliberately shook his head. Aya was so angry that he wanted to break with her. If it weren't for seeing her as a little girl, she punched her down and lost her medicine. Shi Rou smiled and said, "They are all their own, so they care about these things." When Qin Lingjun heard this little mute, he dared to make irresponsible remarks to his master. He was so angry with his hands on his hips that he stared and said, "Zhou Junchen, be careful when speaking. I know your master and you belong to her. You know all the butchers in the town and you weigh them yourself." Ahei said, "Do you know my master?" "I still know my master's master. What happened to me accidentally? Are you hitting me?" "Among other things, Luopa Mountain is one of the best and it's not worthy of trouble at all." Shi Rou touched the child's head and whispered softly, "The family is not allowed to talk angry." In fact, Shi Rou was not afraid of anyone up and down on the Luopa Mountain. Only Cui Dongshan was afraid. He could speak out any strange things such as walking the birds. But that is an old calendar that can't bear to look back. It has been too much in recent years, especially as long as the mountain owner is home. Cui Dongshan usually smiles to everyone. Cui Dongshan brought his sister Cui Peanut back last time, and also gave Shi Rou a sandalwood comb with a 3-character inscription, "Thinking of beauty." Amma stepped on the small bench, lay on the counter, sternly stretched out a hand and said to Qin Lingjun, "Don't talk to me, help her pay off the debt if you have the ability and then take as much as you like. I did it myself and it didn't taste good, so I can scold me anyway." Qin Lingjun lifted up his sleeves. "Damn, Uncle Chen's life has been rough and a few baskets are dissatisfied. It's not uncommon to say, except that he hasn't smashed his head on the money. Let's talk. How much money?" The white-haired boy turned his head, his cheeks bulged and said vaguely, Don't you just owe it, and it's not that you don't pay it back. It's better to owe money than to owe favor. Qin Lingjun came to the white-haired boy. If it hadn't been for the big white goose's deception, he really couldn't tell that it was a little girl. The little girl did not have this name before Xian. Then Qin Lingjun didn't like it anymore, so she had to say something before she changed her name to Huang Ho. Old girl, listen to Brother Chen's advice. The little girl's family choose the name. It's best not to use cursive words. In the past years, except for the palace, the female official is natural, and the road is named Fengshou. Her most beloved thing is a with a dragon and phoenix shape, golden color, and luo tsuizao. The white-haired boy bulged his cheeks and said vaguely, "Don't be old girl, it's very unpleasant, so quickly change the way." Qin Ling said, "But you didn't bring a handle. Let me call your brother, I really can't say it." The white-haired boy said with no air, "Go aside." Qin Lingjun had to go to the shop next door to find Brother Jia for a drink. Brother Jia's all-inclusive truths can be said that those who tend to be inflamed will only spread it out on the surface. Since ancient times, people are not busy, so they need to take time out. He also said that he was once a suave, handsome man, but it was a pity that he didn't know the troubled life of the world at an early age. Isn't this much more elegant than those village heads of aunts and bachelors? The two brothers are good, one familiar door and one familiar road. Soon they set up a wine bureau and sat down for a drink. Today Qin Ling brought 2 jars of good wine over. Old God Jia took a sip and shuddered. Good wine and good wine. Qin Lingjun sat cross-legged on the bench and said with a smile, drinking and letting water shake. The old fairy wiped the corner of his mouth with his thumb. 3 are right. Older and younger, he laughed, drinking and drinking. Jia Xing came from a small country under the vassal of central China, a place called Bozhou. He said that his hometown has been a wine country since ancient times. Sparrows can drink 2 or 2. So that even the little mute next door has learned to swear, not as good as a Bozhou sparrow. Qin Lingjun frowned suddenly, put down the wine bowl and said in his heart, "There are a few people in Qilong Alley. You can go to the backyard first, Brother Jia. If you are sure that it is not the cause of trouble, you can come out to serve guests." The blind old Taoist smiled and said, "It doesn't matter, let me know for a while." Qin Lingjun said, "At least 3 nascent soul stages." The old Taoist immediately got up. "I will take Jiu Air and Peanuts to the backyard to stay, and then secretly inform the law." Qin Lingjun nodded, put on his boots and walked to the door of the shop alone, reminding Shuro to stay a little longer, take care of Huang Ho and Aha, and don't make heads no matter what happens next. The 3 guests, 2 men and 1 woman, were all strange faces. A young-looking man with an elegant manner. A stocky man with an old-fashioned appearance. He slung a heavy cotton package. There is also a tall woman who is not a beauty, but she is brave. She hangs a long knife with a white poplar handle on her waist. The 3 of them walked down from the top of Riding Dragon Alley, and the woman said in her heart, "This place is indeed rich in water transport, and the dragon is full of energy. It is unusual. No wonder the master stayed here." In the boundary of Longzhou, in addition to the extremely high-ranked Tiefu River, there are 3 confluences of Chongtan Yiye and embroidery in Hongzhou town. It's just that Yanghua, the of water of the Taifujiang River, has moved to the post of great dereliction. The young man smiled and said, "Friend Lingjun," Qin Lingjun questioned, "Are you?" The young man stretched out his hand and wiped his face, removing the blindfold, revealing his true colors on this side of the town. Qin Lingjun smiled and said, "It turned out to be old Master Qin. It's been a long time since I saw him. Know each other but haven't dealt much with each other." The other party had previously set up a school in Longweixi Chen's school and worked as a master for some time. He heard that he was an old drunkard who was addicted to alcohol, and soon went out for a long trip. Because of the lack of reputation, the ability to teach is sloppy and no one cares about the school. Because Pei Qian went to school when he was a child, Qin Lingjun couldn't rest assured, so he secretly went over there to squat on the wall and looked at the old master as if his name was Qin Zhenrong. He heard Debaigo say that this old man from a foreign country came from Nanpasa and talked to the Saint Wanqiong has a good relationship. The 2 people around the old master began to introduce themselves. The man called himself Luoshan Myuk, the Taoist name Pine Resin. The woman smiled sincerely and said readily, "My name is Qin Bugue, a native of Zhongtu County." Qin Lingjun's brain was so painful that he was so obscure he was confused by Uncle Qin, right? "It's fine if the master is here, I can't answer the conversation." With an idea, Qin Lingjun shouted, "Brother Jia, the shop is here for guests." The blind old Taoist immediately rushed out. Hospitality came and there happened to be a wine table. Old God Jia and Qin Ling were sitting on the same bench. Except for that Luoyang Mu guest who is not good at speech, he did not drink less. The other old Master Qin and Qin Budu are both refreshing people with unbridled words. What to say, the old fairy Jia thought in his heart while smiling and toasting. It's almost settled in his heart. It turns out that the dull man with the name of Pine Resin just happened to swim here, intending to take a trip to New Jiashan's Baozhai, and that Qin Dao heard that there are many pure martial arts on the side of Luopa Mountain, and there is also a martial artist. Grandmaster Critic didn't come by asking for advice and learning. She was very interested to see if she could go for a walk in the mountains. The old Jia said that this is not difficult, that is, he has to say hello to Luopashen in advance, and by the way he praised his mountain, which is very energetic and lush. The weather is extremely beautiful and Confucianism is extremely prosperous. He didn't dare to say the most words, lest he might be suspected of selling melons. Qin Bugui smiled and asked, "Treasurer Jia, dare to ask your mountain master, who is he?" Jia Xing took a sip of his wine and smiled. "Speaking of our mountain lord, that poor Wei is extremely humble. He is kind and gentle and he acts in harmony with others." His real name was actually Qin Rong's old master and he laughed blithely. This can be regarded as an unattainable compliment. Qin Bugui smiled and asked, "Dao Chong Jia respects Mr. Nan Feng?" Qin Lingjun was confused. Jia Xing put down the wine bowl, stroked his beard and smiled. It is actually my mountain master who likes old Master Zheng's articles very much. He often persuades me to read more, especially the prose of Mr. Nan Feng, which is full of eloquence. The truth is that it is rigorously organized and elegant. At first glance it does not appear to be a mountain or dew, but in fact it is endless aftertaste. Qin Bugui smiled and said, "It's really unexpected that you Qin Shanzhu fell in love with Mr. Nanfeng's articles. Compared with Bai Yi Suzi and Lu Qi, Master Zheng's prose is indeed not so well known in the world." Old Xianxian Jia immediately explained with a smile. "It's not considered alone, it's just relative. My mountain master who studies academically actually praises the phrase opening a book is beneficial the most. The mountain master once laughed with me, only because my family was poor when I was young, I couldn't go to the school, so I often traveled far away from the hometown on my spiritual road later, just to make up for the study debt." Qin Busu smiled at each other with the man who claimed to be a Luoshan guest. It was a welcoming banquet. Qin Rong, who was born in the Qin clan in Nan Pasuozhou, took two friends to find an inn to settle down first, and then waited for news from Luopa Mountain. Qin Lingjun feels shocked whenever he sees a stranger. Fortunately, there is also the most reliable old brother Jia outside the wine table. It is worth seeing anyone. In the early years, Wei Xian and Lu Baixiang passed by Qilong Alley and sat here for a while. Brother Jia met Wei Xian and was shocked. Later, when Pei Qian broke the secret, he realized that he had made a big joke. What is Wei Xian's so-called massive? All the way to the end of Qilong Alley. When returning to the shop, Qin Lingjun jumped up and patted brother Jia on the shoulder. "Good conversation." The old fairy Jia smiled while stroking his beard. "When dealing with people and things, if you are not humble, I dare not say that there is half the skill of the mountain master, 20 or 30% after all, there is still something." Wearing a snow-white robe, she walked slowly down the steps of Qilong Lane and stopped at the door with a smile on her face. This girl squinted and smiled all year round, but no one really thought she was good at talking. Even the fearless Alma at the shop next door, met a long life just like to stop cooking and be a little dumb. Unexpectedly, the smile on Chiang Mai's face today reveals a sense of sincerity. The flattered old fairy Jia did not dare to be overwhelmed. He immediately bowed his head and shook his hands a few times towards the door. Then he slid sideways, spreading his hands and said with a bright smile, "Please, please. Please inside." Changming leaned against the door, nodded to the blind old Taoist and then said to Qin Lingjun, "Most of these people are coming to you." Qin Lingjun stomped as if struck by lightning, slammed his sleeves and wailed, "What kind of sin did you have? No, I can't. The uncle provokes someone. Every day I be kind to others and roadside ants dare not step on it." Alma, who was sitting at the door of the shop next door, stood up, came over here with arms around his chest and asked, "Should I tell Pei Qian?" Qin Lingjun's eyes turned sharply and looked for Pei Qian. It worked. The problem was that Pei Qian liked to keep accounts. You can't be too arrogant, isn't it? Long-lived licking melon seeds, he smiled and said, is it a good thing to come to you? Qin Lingjun coughed and waved to Naamon. Go and go, children, don't mix up with adults. Asha pulled his mouth, turned and left. Qin Lingjun added, I have received it with good intentions. Next time I will go to my Li Jin brother's shop to buy a book and just report my name. It's useless to report his name. After all, there is no discount on the name of the master. But he can sneak a trip to Red Candle Town and advance the book money first, as it is an advance payment to the bookstore, and then let Li Jin pretend to be a discount when he buys the book with a Raimi bag. This kind of trivial matter, you Master Chongtan River Water God, will not be embarrassed, right? If it is true that this little face is not given, how can you mess around? What? Shall Uncle Chin teach you? Dali Capital Tong Tufang. An old man with old clothes squatted in an alley and just finished a game of chess with someone. The other party is playing wild chess to make money, and the old man is like being the of wealth giving money to disperse money. The next game of Go takes too long, so almost all of them here in the alley are chess, some of which are based on real skills to win money, and more are tricky old-fashioned endgames. The old man stood up, kneaded his wrists and jumped twice, making me want to get serious next. I'm so angry, not to mention losing money and being scolded by some old men who like to give pointers. The one who squatted over and won a lot of money was a smiling young man with a short body and a little crooked figure. At the moment, the man was only worried that the poor old gentleman had not enough money in his pocket. The old man squatted down again and took a deep breath, but after a round he had to pay for the bill again. This old gentleman's chess skills are really hard to describe in a word, and his ability to regret chess is higher than playing chess. Almost every 3 or 5 steps I take I must yell and let me regret it. Why did you put it in the wrong place? When you get older your eyes are not helpful. Later young men got used to it. As soon as the old man looked up, he knew that he had to make a discussion. It's simple anyway, no regrets, no discussion. Fortunately, I was happy when I gave the money and I was willing to lose in the gambling, poor chess skills, low chess quality and good gambling. The old man still seemed to be a little unconvinced. If my students are there, I can't keep the loss. The young man smiled. The old gentleman can just call the students and the stakes can go up in the past. The old man sighed and said, isn't it impossible to shout? The young man joked casually, the old man is still a teacher who is full of peach and plum? Seeing very poor, an old and shriveled money bag with cotton cloth is now getting thinner and thinner. If you remove the copper coins, you will definitely not be able to hold a few pieces of silver. The old man smiled and said, there are not many students but all of them are talented. Blue is better than blue. The young man asked with a smile. In the old gentleman's proud disciple, is it possible that he has also been a Jinsher and Juren master? What a tricky question. The old scholar was a little dumb for a while. The 2 generations of mentoring and apprenticeship, only the imperial examination fame is really the only weakness. It seems that except for having a reputation as a talent, then there is no more. Fortunately, among the disciples there was a Chow Sunny, a good seedling. Fortunately. Seeing that old gentleman shook his head. A little bit of enthusiasm and hope in a man's eyes is fleeting. I thought I met a certain old man from Dali officialdom who looked like a wild crane. The man who played chess to win money was so easy to win money so that when the old man regretted chess or hesitated to make a move, the young man leaned his back against the wall, took out a well-engraved book from his arms and took it away. Turning a few pages of books to illuminate the light, in fact the content has long been memorized. The old scholar smiled and asked, is my brother the one who went to Beijing to rush the exam? The man shook his head, it's not for the time being. I came to Beijing to participate in Xiwei. My ancestral home is from Huazhou. Later I moved to Jiangyi with my ancestors. I can barely count as a local in Beijing. Enough, I just owe my hands and I bought 2 more rare books, so I have to come here to set up a stall and play chess. Otherwise the people who have no relatives in the capital will not be able to survive the rural test. The old scholar said, title on the guild list, drinking looming banquet, it's all right. Why do you see it? Could the old man still look at the picture? Look at the picture, it will be so lost, it's just that there are sages and there are no people in the ancients and scholars are not good. The man was stunned, then laughed and waved his hand at the sage book that hadn't been lifted for a long time. It is reasonable and reasonable. I never thought that the old man was still a fellow man. The old scholar stroked his beard and smiled. It is extremely, I never thought that young people have such sophisticated eyes. The man rolled up the book, shook his fist. No matter what, then borrow the old gentleman's good words. As long as I can pass the local examination, I will invite the old gentleman to drink. The old scholar smiled without saying a word. The man put the book away and put it in his sleeve. Seeing that the old man was still looking at him with a smile, he had to slap his head and suddenly said, I almost forgot to say to the old man. My name is Lu Lingchong. On the day it was released, if I got a hit, I came here to set up a stall and wait for the old man. If I missed it, I would just go home. It's good to dare. The old scholar nodded. Brother Lu, let me say a few more words. Good and evil in appearance, not good or bad, and the rules are not good or bad, so you need to be vigorous. Lu Lingchong smiled and nodded and said yes, not taking it seriously. After Laozi passes the Juran examination, he will be admitted to the Jinshi. In the future he will come to discuss what talents and virtues will be. The old scholar got up and left. Lu Lingchong squatted on the ground. When the old man turned his head after a few steps, the man smiled and waved goodbye. The old scholar sighed and walked away after holding his hands. The north wind blows the miasma, the south wind is more dead. Difficulty in this life, worry is my teacher. Little incomprehensible, old and lazy, 1 or 10 legacy in academic studies. The water, land and ice are in the sky and the sky is freezing, and the sight of plum blossoms makes you clear. Poems of old scholars are thriving, and they only think that good poems are good poems. Even if Bai is here, you must resist the urge to make a case and scream. On the side of the alley where the Rinyun Iyun Tower was located, Li Shixing followed the book boy Cui Ci and traveled through the city of Dali. After Li Shixing returned to Beiju Luzhou from the Middle-earth Shenzhou before, he continued his study in that small country under the vassal. An old master suddenly visited the house. Later, Li Shixing happened to encounter a young Taoist priest and an old master on his way to the south. In fact, this reunion was a bit embarrassing for Li Shixing. The old master of Taoism in the East China Sea was very happy. Now this awe-inspiring Confucian student Li Shixing has once again met with the respected Taoist ancestor. Is it a Taoist chief or a Confucian ritual? As a result, Li Shixing made a check with Daozu, then took a step back and bowed. After that, Li Shixing came to the capital with Cui Ci, mainly because there was too much movement in the place before, and Li Shixing was far away in Luzhou and Beiju and he felt inwardly. Dali cavalry is invincible. The world is shaking and people are not worried. At the entrance of the alley, Lu Pa saw the man with good-looking Confucian shirt standing outside the alley, and then moved towards the alley. The old monk glanced at his disciple immediately. The boy answered with his eyes, why? The old monk saw that he wasn't able to open his mind, so he could only ask in his heart, should I stop? Zhao Duanming said heartily, I don't know him anyway. Sure? Don't look again. Master, I really don't know him. There are so many hanging statues in the Confucian temple to accompany the saints and sages. You kid, think about it carefully and come up with the vision that Tianshui Zhao's children should have. Master, are you annoying? I really don't know him. I don't know him at all. Duanming, you swear. Master, it's almost enough. Otherwise the relationship between our master and apprentice will be really weak. Lu Jia put his heart down, showed his figure and asked, who? Li Shixing smiled and said, my name is Li Shixing and my hometown is Huaihuang County, Dalilong Prefecture. Lu Jia and Yen Yu said with a smile, that means being with Qin Pingon. I'm sorry, I have to stop here. In fact, there was a tall old Taoist leader before and a young Taoist boy who was mostly an apprentice was next to him. He also appeared here, stopped outside the alley, one old and the other young standing side by side, peering into the alley. Of course it was stopped by Lu Jia, sneaky and unreasonable. Since you are a member of the Taoist school and where your duties are, what are you afraid of? Besides, the two Taoist priests didn't have the robes of Bai Yujing Sanmai Daomen. In Qin Nuansh's house, a calendar and a large form were hung on the wall. There is also a booklet, one a year. Every year on the 30th eve of the new year, it will be bound into a booklet, 356 pages, 1 page a day. He keeps accounts every day and Nuanshu also records some interesting trivial things that he hears and sees. Therefore, on the Luopa mountain, in fact, the thickest account book and the largest number of books are Nuanshu. It is not money, and naturally it is not only millet grains that only record the expenditure of each sunflower seed. In addition to sweeping the courtyard every day, he also serves the flowers and plants, and divides more and more mountain books into different categories. If you have a book, you have to pick a day to publish the book. Help Mr. Zhou go to the bamboo forest on his mountain to find old bamboos and carve some bamboo carvings. Picking seasonal wild vegetables, she also has to make her own wine, pickled vegetables and cured meat to dry the ham, and the patrolling roads of several millet grains also need to be taken care of to avoid weeds. At the end of the new year, in addition to cutting the window grills, Mr. Zhou or a cultivator will also be asked to write the Spring Festival couplets, and then bring the millet grains together to paste the Spring Festival couplets. In addition, he must pay respect to the stove prince and send the poor gods. There are so many vassal hills, there are often camping affairs. She needs to hang the sword charm, go out in the wind, fall down at the foot of the mountain, mountaineering, and send some tea and snacks to the craftsmen. People come and go during the festivals. The mountain looks like a pinfish on the back and the clothing belt peaks. Actually, there is the Longquan Jianzong of Master Wan earlier, which is definitely going to be there. There are also many neighbors in the small town under the mountain. Old people need to visit from time to time. Also learn bookkeeping from Mr. Wei. Go down the mountain regularly to buy in Longzhou. There is also Master's Mud Bottle Alley. In addition to cleaning the ancestral house, the two neighboring houses, although they are not occupied. But the roof and the mud wall should also be paid attention to. Because there are more and more people in Luopa Mountain, and because of the household registration, you need to deal with the county government frequently. For example, the recent Xiaosui shop in Qilong Lane, Chui Peanut in Chaotu shop, Wanshu worried about Huaihuang County at first. On the side of the Yahoo room, I felt that I was a girl who was not reliable, so I called Mr. Zhu to go down the mountain. Later, Yumi Jianxian also helped and took the initiative to go to the county town with her. But now I don't need it anymore, I know her very well there. The one who only needed to call Uncle Song now has to call Grandpa Song. As for all these years, she hasn't grown tall either, and she's not surprised at the county government, and she doesn't discuss anything. All kinds of strange stones searched from the hills of so many vassal families were made into bonsai decorations. They were used as literary gifts. The swallows held mud like mud. They were constantly moved to houses that were actually not very frequent. They were also painted by Mr. Zhu. The paintings of landscapes, flowers and birds, and ladies should not be piled up randomly, otherwise they will be vulgar. You must also consider how to match porcelain, such as flower vases for growing flowers, as the so-called flower god's abode by the gentleman. The Tibetan bronze goblets are followed by several official porcelains that are as blue as the sky and are beautiful and moisturized. Each house on the mountain needs to place different styles of the four treasures of the study, wardrobes, bookshelves, screen murals, and plant different flowers and plants according to the different preferences of the owner. Son Wanshu built a flower shed by herself. Tang Huashu consulted Mr. Zhu and the teacher, and she would read the books by herself, so her bookshelves were all these books. Even if there are more people, more and more things happen. In the mountains and outside, she was still cleaned and organized by a girl in a pink skirt. In addition, on the Luopa mountain, all things that have happened, no matter how big or small, than Wanshu are almost clear. Of course, the millet grains will often help, carrying a golden pole on one's shoulder and holding a trekking pole. Today Miyu was wandering around the mountain and found that Wanshu was rarely idle, sitting on the stone table beside the cliff in a daze. Miyu walked over and asked with a smile, "Wanshu, how many years have you been here?" Wanshu hurriedly got up and gave a blessing to Mi Jianxian and smiled after sitting down. "It hasn't been 30 years yet." Miyu licked melon seeds and asked softly, "Don't you feel bored?" "For more than 20 years, every day is so busy. The key is the trivial matters year after year, day after day. It seems there is no end." Even he is a idler who likes to stay in the Luopa mountain and eat and wait for death. He occasionally wants to go down the mountain for a relaxing trip, quietly taking a long trip with the sword, such as going to Huangting country to enjoy the scenery during the day and at night. Just go to Hongzhou town and take a ride on the flower boat. You can also go to Piyun mountain to find Mr. Wei Shan for a drink and admire the moon. Wanshu shook his head. "No way." Miyu asked, "Aren't you tired?" Wanshu smiled and said, "I will rest." Originally, I wanted to say that I was half a cultivator, but Wanshu didn't feel embarrassed to speak when he thought of his realm. Miyu was a little speechless. A few years ago there were the old-fashioned Xing-Yi boy, the ghostly black charcoal girl, the lively and lovely Millet. Now there are Bai Xian and Huang Ho who set up a table in the pavilion on the side of the road. Only the pink skirt and female skirt, Chen Wanshu, is probably due to her gentle temper. Relatively speaking, she has never attracted much attention. In fact, just like Qin Lingjun and Jiao Lao Xianxian bragged, he is the earliest minister from the dragon next to the master, the oldest senior with the oldest qualifications and the smallest prestige in Luopishan. Before Pei Qian recognizes his master and De Bei recognizes his master, Dafeng brothers are locals, but he went up the mountain late. Really want to talk about seniority, not to lean back? Besides, who else stayed overnight with the master at the ancestral house in Nipping Lane? Stand up if you have the ability, Qin Lingjun. I will give him a few knocks. Since Qin Lingjun is indeed the case, so is Muanshu, of course. Miyu suddenly said, if anyone bullies you in the future, just find me. Just as soon as he said something, Miyu felt that he was talking nonsense. Where can I get my own shot? If someone really dared to bully Muanshu, it is estimated that even if the other party is an ascending realm, they will have to die and they are destined to have no suspense. So Miyu quickly changed his words. For example, Qin Lingjun said something stupid and I will help you teach him. Muanshu's eyebrows curled up and waved. No. A boy in Tsing-yi with big sleeves wagging around laughed and said, oh hello you Xianxian, are you giving instructions to a silly girl to practice? It's a good thing, otherwise, it's unreasonable that the tortoise crawls and the ants move around. Miyu squinted at Muanshu with a smile. Muanshu hesitated, blinked and then nodded gently. Miyu clapped his palms, stood up and walked towards Qin Lingjun. Qin Lingjun noticed something was wrong. Brother Yu, what are you doing? If you have something to say, there are no obstacles to overcome, misunderstandings that cannot be solved, and things that are not easy to discuss. Miyu smiled and said, what do you want? Just give me some guidance. Qin Lingjun ran away without saying a word. On the Luopa mountain, there used to be 3 little girls who were all about the same height. The difference between who was tall and who was short was very close. Often lying together on the floor of the second floor of the bamboo building, the breeze blows, bringing waves of summer cicadas. They rested on the fan and waited for the watermelon in the pond behind the bamboo building to cool down bit by bit. The little sorrow is the white clouds passing by outside the mountain. Some are fatter and walk slower and some are thinner and walk faster. What is it in the mountains? A green shirt and all the goodness. Sword of Coming Chapter 867. There is a small chapter in the evening. A sword was handed out and many of the heart magic illusions that lay on the road ahead were dissipated. The culprit responsible for the pinnacle of the Ascension realm that sits in Tuyue Mountain is not only a pure sword repairman, but also a flying sword in his life, and even inscribed part of the magical powers of the 2 high-ranking gods, Imaginer and Responder. Qing Huang was warm, a golden guile shattered, and his face was full of regret, as if he regretted surrendering that guilty back then. The white-clothed monk turned sideways, leaned back slightly, twisted the string of Buddhist beads in his hand, and looked at the young hidden official from the corner of his eye, with a playful smile, as if to say that the mountains are high and the water is long, and there will be a period of time later. The woman in Tsing-yi with a ponytail did not hide, let the sword light pass by. Tuyue Mountain was split by the middle and it was divided into 2. There was a huge gully that couldn't be bridged and it hadn't been restored for a long time. At the same time, the body of the great demon culprit holding the sword was also cut apart by a sword. For the first time, a look of surprise was revealed on the faraway half of his face. Obviously, Qin Pingan's sword with the more than 3,000 swords handed out earlier has a world of difference. It is no longer limited to the level of swordsmanship, but is full of swordsmanship, and even has the prototype of a certain swordsmanship on its own. So that in the long-lasting trajectory of sword light, it abruptly blocked the culprit's time ring method of Tuyue Mountain. On both sides of this mountain road, the aura of heaven and earth of thousands of miles of mountains and rivers, and even the aura of the mountains and waters and the luck of the weather, are all involved in madness such as 2 turbulent tides, filling the road defects caused by that gully. As if a sword created a realm of emptiness outside the sky, the avenue was moving and the boundaries were clear. Compared to the situation of the culprit, the 3-headed fairy-level monster in the mountains is terrible. The big demon centipede that had been wrapped around the mountain for a few times had the most pitiful end and was unable to escape. This fairyland big demon, whose original spirit had been severely damaged, was cut open together with Tuyue Mountain. The monk Yuan Ying tried to entrap it. Jean Dan fled, still shattered by the sword light that obscured the sky and shattered into several corpses, rolled down the foot of the mountain and died. The other 2 immortals, the one sitting on top of the colorful futon, withered and shriveled in human-shaped skins, teetering in a sword chi flood. The brilliance of the futon under the seat was dimmed, and the immortal figure was drifting in the wind. His appearance has changed from an energetic, old-looking middle-aged man to a skinny and thin old man. In addition, the female demon monk, the golden silk embroidered copper nail pattern armor on her body, and the immortal carrying the lamp shattered together, a still delicate face with countless cracks, like a dry place for many years. In her field, the mountains and rivers in her small world are also in a similarly bleak situation, almost as exhausted and withered. If she fights against the hidden official and kills them and loses and perishes, that's all. But today's disaster is like the young hidden official and the culprit partnering to kill them in these upper 5 realms, teaching her how to be willing. So this female demon monk who ruled in the wild world had a great hatred in her heart. She hated the ruthless sword of the hidden official, and hated the insidious methods of the ancestor of the mountain, and deliberately imprisoned them here. Even if she is in her own patriarch hall, there is the life-saving lamp, which can help her reshape her body and resurrect her corpse. But after all, it has damaged a considerable part of her soul. Moreover, the life-saving lamp can be ignited. The monk's vital gold core and Yuan the infant could not be taken away, so he relied on the life-saving lamp to repractice. It has always been regarded as the most inferior corpse on the mountain. Almost all have to fall below the ground, especially the monster monks in the wild world. Once they lose their innate tyranny, the tough Yao's true body, the road damage is greater than the Howren world's gas trainer. This woman fairy with the proverbial Daoist name is like a weed, her figure swaying with the wind, and her soul is in pain when she is blown by the sword air wind, and the sound of her face and body is like a series of tiny firecrackers. With a touch of her face, it was the kind of dead ashes that the avenue died out. She was desperate, gritted her teeth and stared at the first disciple of Tuyue Mountain outside the mountain. Today's disaster has caused more than 10 people to go to the 5 realms. The comrades died here all thanks to you. The culprit, what a culprit, really has a good name. You are the culprit in the wild world. The culprit fell on deaf ears. Just glanced at the direction of Luyuo from a distance. The woman looked crazy, suddenly burst into laughter, raised the arm that was constantly drifting ashes and patted her head. Come on, the hermit, I will give you another military exploit. Just begging you to do it. The culprit broke Tuyue Mountain. It is not too bad to be able to die in the hands of the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Chi. A golden thunder and lightning landed swiftly from the thunder game, completely breaking up the fairyland female cultivator. The only remaining fairy cultivator stood up from the futon, looked around, smiled bitterly. I never thought it would be such a way to die, a little bit aggrieved. A demon cultivator who had never been to the Great Wall of Sword Chi would actually die on the side of Tuyue Mountain, especially under the hidden officer sword. It was a big joke. The culprit withdrew his gaze and glanced at a place outside of the 2 heaven and earth restrictions. The monster monks in the mountains who died one after another were too late to escape, and never thought that there would be another sword repairman who took the initiative to break into the Tuyue Mountain realm. It was an old sword repairer of the demon race of the nascent soul realm. He hurried over, hovering with his sword, driving a natal flying sword and splitting thousands of long swords, trying to cut a door from the side of the landscape restriction. It is a pity that in this battlefield, it is still just like a slender stream with limited water, crashing on a majestic mountain, doomed to be in vain. Xianxia was still unable to break the double ban on Tuyue Mountain and the caged bird clamoring outside. The culprit looked at Qin Pingan. There is a sword repairman who wants to change his life. What should I say? If you agree, I will let it go. Qin Pingan twitched the corner of his mouth. A nascent soul realm, even if it's a sword repair, changed to a fairyland? Do you think too much? There is such a business in the world. Lu Qin sighed. Our hidden officer really carefully sailed the Wanyan ship. The culprit smiled and said, that sword repairer named Hui Ting comes from Hongye Jianzong. Until this moment, the body shape of the culprit was closed, and Tuo Yueshan resumed its original appearance again. Never thought of that sword intent trajectory, even ignoring the countercurrent of the long river of time, and still running through Tuyue Mountain. The illusion and reality are unpredictable, blooming a dazzling colorful color. That is the bright rhyme of the collision of the long river of time and the mainstay, the glazed shards condensed by time and time, of varying sizes, splashing around Jianlu and Tuyueshan, one after another as fast as a shooting star, as small as a fingernail, as large as a copper coin, scattered all over the world. directly swept out Tuya Mountain's thousands of Li frontiers, slammed into the invisible barrier of the caged small bird world, and finally slammed but broke and had to return to the long river of time. Can be seen that Qin Pingon is only so powerful. At the same time, it means that this sword has left an irreparable sword energy corridor in the world of the culprit. It was like Qin Pingon cut out a sword chi river that resembled a Luluo with a single sword. The culprit continued, "You should have heard of the name Hui Ting. He was also a sword fairy in the Yupu realm. He only fell twice on the battlefield. The most recent time 100 years ago he broke that natal flying sword's powder. Has been recovering from injuries, so I missed the last war." The culprit wasn't worried that Qin Pingon would breach the contract and repent. If he deliberately deceived, he would just open the door directly. "I heard Hongye Jianzong and Hui Ting." Qin Pingon narrowed his eyes and nodded. "Oh, how could I not know this famous monster sword repairer?" On the side of the Summer Palace, the records are very detailed. It's not just this monster sword repairman who likes to go to the Great Wall of Sword Chi to join in the fun and accumulate military exploits, so that the two falls are both on the battlefield, and this sword repairer who has the little powder of the flying sword is in the Great Wall of Sword Chi. On the battlefield, he always likes to sneak attack on women's sword repairs to refine the sword and cultivate a certain kind of flying sword magical power. He once attacked and killed a wounded female sword fairy. Her name is Song Kaiyun. It was the woman who made the two old Jianxiu Zhao Xian and Qing Quan think about it for a lifetime. In fact, Song Kaiyun could have withdrawn from the battlefield at the time, but halfway she encountered a group of young sword repairmen who were in desperate situation. In order to save them, she was found by the monster Yupu realm sword repair Huiting waiting for an opportunity. Sacrificed her natal flying sword Li Fin, and beheaded her with a single sword. Among the few sword repairmen she rescued at the time, there was a young man named Yin Shen who was once sunny and easygoing. Very good, the other party sent it to the door by himself and the sale was done. Qin Pingon took the lead in opening a path to the small bird world in the cage, and then the culprit followed to open the Tueshan formation, letting the nascent soul realm sword repairer rush to the battlefield. The immortal who had been waiting to die saw the familiar sword light and said helplessly, "Hui Ting, are you stupid? A head must be given to the young hidden official for free. As for the aura and kendo aura after the death of the old friend, of course it will be accepted by the culprit." Although Hui Ting did owe him a life, exactly 1.5. He saved Hui Ting once in his early years and helped him a lot later, but how could he take it seriously when he changed his life? The old Jianxiu from a sect of swordsmanship in the wild ignored his friends, but hovered his sword at the boundary of Zhou Xian, looked up at the majestic figure with the lotus crown on his head, and asked with a smile, "You are Xiao Yan's successor? The new hermit Qin Pingon?" Old Xianxia's name Qin Pingon has really become calloused in his ears over the years. On the side of Hongye Jinzong, there is a junior sword repairer who has high hopes. He ranks among the 100 sword immortals of Tuya Mountain. His rank is not high, but he has been fortunate to have been to the Great Wall of Sword Chi in Howren World. It was only on Tongyi's How. Injured, he returned to his hometown and the world very early. He had been in the sect for several years. Whenever I mentioned the young hermit, I was quite admired, because the two sides had never had the opportunity to ask the sword a real time as that trip. One of the biggest regrets. This is the case on my own mountain, and friends visiting from outside the mountain are also almost like birds, which is very annoying. Qin Pingon turned his head and looked at the slim shape of the sword that was as small as a mustard seed. Hui Ting sensed the strong killing intent of the young hidden official and laughed loudly. "Is this life of mine worth some money?" Qin Pingon said calmly, "It's not worth the money you just did." The culprit smiled. If I remember correctly, this is the second time Qin Pingon has officially spoken after he appeared in Tueshan? And compared to the simple word may, the number of words is a lot more. Lu Qin smiled and said, "Respect the strong and pity the weak." This culprit is actually quite interesting. It's a pity that you are in a hostile camp. Otherwise, if you meet in a river and lake somewhere else, you might be able to drink together at the same table. Of course, the so-called respect in this savage world is quite different. The so-called mercy is relatively easy to understand. It means that the culprit let Qin Pingon let off the ant monks of the nearby sect. A sharp sword light slashed down immediately, cutting down from the head of the monster sword repairer. Jian Guang rose again and then cut across the middle. Fa Xiang waved his sleeves again, and a pocket-sized floating mind board appeared beside the old Xianxia, choosing to slowly refine and kill the soul with 5 thunders. The key is that in the thunder game 2 words with golden light were forced to appear. It was Jian Zihui's real name of the monster race, and the light caused by the real name was shaking like a candle in the wind. Abruptly stripped out the real name of the Yaozu. Lu Chen felt a bit creepy for a while. It wasn't that he hadn't seen more tragic scenes than this. It's just that Qin Pingon is the sword maker, which makes people's back a bit chilly. On the path of this kid's practice, whether he handed his sword or punched him, he always didn't like to drag and kill him. He would kill him, and he had never done so deliberately. After the previous questioning was fruitless, Lu Chen seemed a little slack. At this moment he didn't bother to examine Qin Pingan's state of mind. Presumably, this wild sword repairman who has fallen through the realm twice must be on the list at the Summer Palace. The presence. Moreover, it is not easy for a sword repairman to be able to enter the Yupu realm twice. Not to mention the barren world, even in the Great Wall of Jianqi there are only a handful of them. This sale is indeed a good deal. It would be even more cost-effective to slaughter that fairy again. Looking at the posture of the big demon culprit, since he didn't throw the Immortal out of the Tuyue mountain realm, he was clearly waiting for Qin Pingan to break the contract, and he would never stop him. Qin Pingan doubled his finger and smashed the words of the 2 real names of the monster races. Even if Hui Ting placed a life-sustaining lamp in the Hongye Jianzong Patriarch Hall, it would be useless. The great demon of Immortal realm widened his eyes and trembled. Hui Ting. Qin Pingan said, "Don't get out yet?" Into a mountain, the withered Immortal quickly converged his mind, with an incredible face, and asked tentatively, "Really let me live? If you don't believe it, it's better not to go." Qin Pingan was silent for a moment. Seeing that the Immortal was still uncertain, he wanted to run the dangling 5 thunder seal. Unexpectedly, the 10,000 zhang sage suddenly sank, and under his feet the ground collapsed into 2 huge pits. Lu Chen immediately looked at Qin Pingan's personal world, and at the same time a string of Yaozu's real names appeared at the same time, and all of them were in the Ascension realm with a long history. Qin Pingan slashed to support Yueshan again with a sword. In an instant the landscape is hazy, there is no cave, and it is inexplicably placed in a mysterious environment with extremely boring scenery. It was a long corridor that seemed to have no end. At first glance, even with Qin Ping's current 14 realms, he could not see the exit even with exhaustive eyesight. When Qin Pingan put away his great gestures, the corridor shrank. On the right-hand side are countless doors, and on the other side is the end of the 2 ends of the Great Wall of Sword Qi in the early years. It is an endless void, a long river of time that does not know where to lead. In history, many Confucian temples accompany saints and sages have fallen on this road. The 4 previous worlds, coupled with today's multicolored world, the so-called borders between each other, are nothing more than the existence of several post roads opened by the sages, the existence of time ferry crossings, and the ascension of the great monks on the top of the mountain. Only by this can he travel far and cross the world without getting lost in the long river of time and becoming a corpse outside the sky. In fact, several worlds are far apart from each other. Lu Chen frowned and said, "It was Bai Zhe who made the move and deliberately provoking the action at this time. Is it provoking the boss sword Immortal? As expected, it is Bai Zhe. If you want to provoke it, you should not provoke it." Obviously, as soon as Bai Zhe returned to the wild world, after Qin Qingdu killed the ancient high gods with a single sword, he immediately exchanged courtesy and awakened the powerful sleeper on the side of Yilyuo, and hibernated in various secret realms for a long time. The ancient great demon is about to wake up completely. Is it just that after Bai Zhe breaks those hibernations, it seems that his strength has declined? It's no wonder that Bai Zhe is so confident and unpredictable. This path is really unexpected. Lu Chen sat in the Lotus Dojo. After some deductions, he was surprised and smiled with his palms. "So, I understand Bai Zhe's 14 realms of Kotaoism, such a fantastic idea, is comparable to the poor Dao. His 5 dreams and 7 minds. Everyone knows that Bai Yujing's 3 head teachers have the mysterious 5 dreams and 7 mental expressions, which is so mysterious that Lu Chen himself can't crack it. Separately from the dream Confucian teacher Jing Chong, the skull on the pillow in the dream reverts to the white bone real person, the oak tree in the dream is alive, the tortoise in the dream is dead, and the butterfly in the dream does not know who I am or who dreams and wakes up. In addition to the 5 dreams, there are 7 phases walking along the road of Luanqin: the wooden chicken, the tree, the mole, the ping, the cardinal, the bird, the butterfly, and the road evolves in turn. If the existence of the 3 patriarchs, each determined the height of Taoism in the world. So Baize's way of harmony is the greatest shock to the other worlds. Although Baize is not warlike and has never been interested in killing, if he therefore regards Baize as a soft-hearted monk, then it's too naive. Thousands of years ago on the earth, the demons who ruled the world had accidentally died in Baize's hands. Terran monks, whether they are gas practitioners or pure sword repairs, Baize killed a lot of them. In the riverside meeting tens of thousands of years ago, Baize took the initiative to sacrifice the interests of the demon clan and handed over the real names of a considerable part of the great demon in order to allow both worlds to recover. But it was Baize's move with far-reaching significance. Just like he drew a bottom line for the world, that is, the demon race must be guaranteed to thrive so as not to be too strong and wantonly attack, leading to wars that spread across the world. But Baize also, it is absolutely forbidden for any external forces to be able to kill the monster race. Those who cross the line and those who cross the boundary are enemies with Baize, which is equal to a battle between life and death. Once the monster monks in the wild world were severely damaged, Baize's cultivation base would skyrocket. Qin Pingon stood in place, not worrying about cutting the secret realm with the sword, nor was he anxious about Yufeng's advance. Instead he switched to holding the sword in his right hand. Earlier he handed out the sword with all his strength. Even with the tough physique of the 10-level martial artist returning to the true level, I am afraid it will be broken. Qin Pingon took a gentle breath to stabilize the mountains and rivers in his body. Before the 2-sleeved spring breeze, the small world of the human body, like the resonance of heaven and man, and the resonance of the earth, spring thunder vibrated. The long sword Yeo hovered on the left side of his figure. Qin Pingon moved slightly, and the blade of Yeo pierced into the river of time, leaving only half of the sword body. A trace of divine traction from the night tour tried to determine how far away the wall is. As a result, there was a burst of involuntary dizziness. Qin Pingon hurriedly stabilized Dao Exin and put away the heart of the mind. The road is beyond the sky. The reason why he was not in a hurry was because he was fighting with the golden body Faxiang and the Taoist Xing Yi, who remained on the other side of the Tuyue mountain boundary. The feelings between the 3 were still clear and disconnected. With this, Qin Pingon can still see all the movements of the big demon culprit. It is not the 84,000 methods of Buddhism. In this seemingly endless corridor, each door is engraved with a number, 1 to 9, starting with 3 and then 9 numbers, seemingly arranged in disorder. It's an artist's method, and the numbers are arranged according to the secret rate. Luchin explained, if there is no accident and we reach the end, we will encounter a house with no numbers. But if we can't give an accurate number, this small world will definitely collapse, and the power is roughly equivalent to the most proud sword in the life of the pinnacle sword repairman in the Ascension realm. Of course, if the 2 of us are lucky enough to guess the number, we can swagger out of the secret realm. Qin Pingon smiled and said, the secret rate? I heard that Shujia Zushitang has a treasure of Zhenshan, which is to create a world of formations that circulate by the avenue through the secret rate. It can be regarded as a method of pressing the bottom of the box. That piece of ancestral compass, rumored that the ancestors of the past and the geniuses of arithmetic have worked together for 6,000 years. By the way, can the compass really detain an ascended monk outside of the sword repair at will? Luchin curled his lips. That's the old almanac. When calculating the number 99,999, he encountered the second illusory bottleneck of the avenue, and the 2 masters of the Shu family were afraid to go. After all, I've suffered twice before for fear of falling short of success, and inviting the victory of the heavens, causing the heavy treasure to collapse. As a result, I met your brother and Shu, who helped to cross the sky. Of course, I don't like the outsider Cui Hong taking that treasure of Zhenshan too seriously, but the state of mind is the most innocent. It matters a lot, not to say that his magic methods must be higher than the master of mathematics. Luchin sighed. The reason why you say it is the old almanac is because you just called the except for sword repair, which has to be removed. Qin Pingon frowned slightly. Luchin smiled and said, don't think too much, the poor old almanac has another meaning. The 2 masters who were obsessed with learning failed to make a contribution in that battle and won the ascendant monster, or it was to help Qin Chunan join forces against the enemy Lu Cha. But it was not that they deliberately looked on the sidelines. but a rebellious person with excellent talent appeared inside. He was sinister and deliberate. He deliberately gave 8 wrong numbers. The next few hundred, naturally it was all wrong, which caused a big problem with that compass, and it was almost destroyed. Qin Pingon was silent. On the road trip, the mountains and rivers are steep. Lu Qin screamed, "The poor road is well informed. What's wrong? Who's in the way?" Qin Pingon sneered, "Then we too will take advantage of a moment of leisure to turn over the old accounts? For example, Shi Rou in Qilong Lane." The third head teacher Bai Yujing looked at the town for many years through her eyes. Lu Qin began to change the subject. "That culprit is delaying time? What's the point? Tua Yueshan has no legs, so he is waiting for rescue? For example, Bai Zhe, who has returned to the wilderness?" Qin Pingon shook his sleeves and fluttered out a piece of thousands of talisman papers. It was made of the most common yellow urn. It is not rare to sell at the Shanshui Ferry and Xianxia Inn. Demon slayers, this thing is indispensable. Qin Pingon stretched out his hand and covered a piece of talisman paper with his palm, and with one touch, thousands of yellow urns instantly turned into talisman, all of which were all unique landscape and obstacle-breaking talisman. Waved his sleeves again, a long river of talisman like a scout exploring the way, taking the lead to travel far. Lu Qin hesitated and reminded, "Don't be too greedy and addicted to the realm. Once you become a veritable monk of the 14 realms, you will be a world where the gates are strictly forbidden, just like entering the land of no one, letting you have vast expanse of mountains and rivers, large and retractable mountains, and cross rivers and rivers at will. This kind of unfettered and unrestrained nature is in harmony with the Taoism of pure sword repair." Qin Pingon nodded. "Of course we need to introspect. It is difficult to change from extravagance to frugality. With a sharp blade in hand, the murderous heart starts from the beginning. As soon as Daofa becomes fat, the world becomes thinner. A person who has the right way, once he can't hold back even a little bit of mind, he will idle to fight the mosquitoes and flies and suddenly kill the mosquitoes. At the slightest level, the Taoist heart is scattered, but at the worst, it is insane." Qin Pingon walked slowly, suddenly stopped and opened a door of the room casually, and found that there were 2 frozen time scrolls, one clear and the other blurry. This was because Lu Qin temporarily borrowed Taoism to himself. There is an overlap of the 2 picture scroll scenes. One of the landscape paintings shows a child climbing a mountain with a large basket on his back, while Lu Chen's time picture shows a boat ride on the sea, a boatman, and it is Gu Qingxong, who is an anonymous disciple and the Taoist name Xianxia. But that for a while Xianxia looked very young with a square face, big eyes, and a stupid head and brain. In a flat boat, the 2 went to sea to visit the Immortals. Seeing the bow that fell into the water, it seemed that it was about to break the water. In the depths of the sea, there seemed to be a light, soft and quiet, as if waiting for this boat. Lu Qin smiled awkwardly. Don't look, be careful of the culprit." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Everyone depends on what they are afraid of." Lu Qin helplessly said, "Don't you feel bad when you say this?" Qin Pingon found that talisman of running water, flying all the way for tens of thousands of miles. This corridor is like an ancient well without a bottom. Regardless of the futile work of the Fulua, Qin Pingon always controlled the night tour of the long sword, constantly cutting the invisible wall of the time barrier, and then remembering the sporadic unusual movements, and spreading out a brand new account book in the Xinhu book building. It is recorded in detail. Lu Qin explained, "This place is a vortex of a long river of time similar to the way to the ruins. The length of time and the distance of the journey cannot be guessed by common sense." Qin Pingon nodded. "This kind of mysterious road manifests. The opportunity is rare, and it is a rare opportunity in a lifetime. Even if it is just a little bit of insight, it is equivalent to a successful step on a path pioneered by someone else. With the first step, it is equivalent to having in the direction of the avenue." That's why Qin Pingon used the night tour longsword to test the reality and fiction. What's more, outside the world, a statue of a golden body that imitates Bai Yujing's foot is in control of the sword fairy flag and the 5 thunder seals. And there is also the Xinjiai Taoist who resembles the ancient who travels far away from the body, and the river is in endless water. Law against attack. Not idle. Lu Qin asked, "Still fighting outside?" Qin Pingon nodded and said, "The culprit is killing Bai Yujing. Every time the culprit passes the sword, the stone of the other mountain can attack Jade. Bai Yujing is too much, some hidden deep avenues are circulating, Even if Qin Pingon is the master of refining them, they can't be completely investigated, plus he doesn't know much about Daomen's skills. In many places they all know why they don't know why. It's like the common seal carvers under the mountain who can carve an excellent seal, but in fact they dare not say everything about the internal texture of jade. So just make sure that the immortal family treasure will not be chopped to pieces by the culprit. The more the culprit was able to dismantle an imitation by Yujing with swordsmanship, the more Qin Pingon could stand by and watch. The only pity is that the old white jade palace was imitated by the founder of the Jade Talisman Palace, which was the old by Yujing thousands of years ago. Lu Qin rubbed his chin. This is strange. If the culprit stood still, it could help Tuyue Mountain to support it longer. Otherwise, it seems to be using magical powers and the spells are repeated, which will only make Qin Pingon hand out dozens or even hundreds of swords towards Tuyue Xianxia. Qin Pingon said, "Of course, the culprit of the big demon also hopes to fight happily, for example as a pure sword repairer, asking people about the sword. As for whether it's me, it doesn't really matter as long as the opponent's realm is sufficient, such as replacing Qilao. Sword Immortal, maybe they started to cut each other with swords at this moment. When I leave here later, Jian Xiu's culprit will definitely get what he wants." Lu Chenmei said, "How many wild monsters with throne strength did that guy eat?" Qin Pingon thought for a while. "A lot." Repeated again, "A lot." One of Zhou Mi's successors is to predict that Bai Zhe will return to his hometown, willing to assist Jian Shiran, the nominal co-master of the world, confronting Haoran together. You must know that when Hei's Zhou Mi Yinshin is the 14th level monk Lu Fian who was annexed by him. The Yangshan body is the demon Bai Ying of the Withered Bone Throne. In addition, he also ate Qi Yun Huang Wanyao. He is waiting for the old thrones. This is just the result of careful placement on the table. If it weren't for the calculation, Bai Zhe would return to the wilderness, and it is estimated that with a thorough appetite he would have to eat more Ascension Realm in secret. This kind of thing, I am afraid, except for thoroughness, in fact any major monk, even if it is the same 14th stage, still can't do it. Lu Qin sighed sincerely. To some extent this guy is really a lonely person. The three are indispensable. First of all, they need to get the acquiescence of the great ancestor of Tuyue, and secondly, they need to have enough of their own realm to have the strength to kill the 14th level cultivator. Finally, and the biggest problem lies in the fact that Zhou Mi can solve the hidden dangers of the conflicting avenues with his own knowledge of the sky. Zhou Mi also ensures that he will not act against the sky in this way, and will not be disgusted and suppressed by the avenues of the wild world, which will damage his own strength. Otherwise, why didn't the great ancestor Tuyue come and do it himself? With this, you can take the last half step and the avenue is complete without any omissions, truly among the 15th realms. It's not unwilling, but it can't. It is very possible that Zhou Mi, who has already ascended to the sky, still has the means to let these chicken ribs that have been brought to the new heaven be stripped out, and then completely wiped out so that Bai Zhe can make up for the damage to the road to awaken the hibernating big demon. For example, Bai Zhe belongs to his real name? Then Qin Pinganis Hedao half the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Nian Xan used the method of sewing people to help Qin Pingan bear the real name of the great demon. It became an unreasonable key player. Stop Bai Zhe and intercept his real name. To be precise, it is the young hidden official who stays in the world, blocking the gods and men who are outside the sky. A single plank bridge, like someone blocking the way, cut off Jin Lu and give me the other. Lu Qin admired him. Before, Bai Zhe didn't shoot at you on the other side of the Lulua River. It's really not an ordinary superior demeanor. Qin Pingon said, I won't do it if I exchange positions. I can do it. Of course Mr. Bai is even more so. There is nothing to worry about. Lu Qin was speechless for a while, a little understanding of how the hermit-Samus elder relationship came about. He is so perfect and superb, and the most important thing is sincerity. Lu Qin hesitated and asked, Qin Pingon, you are not actually a left-handed, are you? Qin Pingon didn't have anything to hide. When he was a child he went up the mountain, fell and suffered a cut on his right hand. He injured his muscles and bones for 100 days. Drafting also pays attention to balance between hands, so I can't talk about left-handed and right-handed. Beautiful scenery and valuable herbs are often in precarious places. Lu Qin was completely speechless. You are a bit too much. It is very possible that Qin Pingan's right-hand sword and fist have never really been deadly. Even if it did, it must have been hidden perfectly in the eyes of all outsiders. Therefore Qin Ping An's disguise as an excellent left-handed is actually another layer of blindness. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It doesn't matter who you are." Back then the straw shoe boy in Mud Bottle Alley passed by his fortune-telling booth. At that time he looked at how simple and talkative from beginning to end, there was nothing strange. But after so many years the money fan is still there. In fact, after studying it deeply, Lu Chen is not surprised by Qin Ping An's changes. The fewer words in a book, the longer the aftertaste. On the other hand, the more words, the less scrutiny it is, but the white paper, right and wrong, are all inside after all, at a glance: suffering, hard work, persistence, choice, travel, homecoming, disappointment, hope. Lu Chen glanced at Qin Pingon holding a long sword, his expression dignified. "What's the matter? Why is it so clear?" "Out of the sky, she once personally beheaded the armored." Lu Chen knew about it when he participated in the Riverside meeting. After all, she was holding a head and was attending the meeting. Then she just threw it into the long river of time. Lu Chen believed that even if 10,000 years passed he would still remember that scene. However, according to Lu Chen's deduction, even if she suffered a lot of damage to the road in the battle outside the sky, she was still not in the current situation, just like she is her. Qin Pingon is Qin Pingon, the sword is the sword, and the sword bearer, it's really just a sword bearer literally. Qin Pingon looked down at the long sword in his hand and said, "I left the Great Wall of Jianxia inexplicably and appeared in a place on the sea called Zhaohua Cave. Later, I discovered that Brother Cui did not know how to interrupt me in her. That mind pull. Apart from deliberately letting Qin Pingon go astray, he has been like falling into the clouds and has to repeatedly ask himself whether life is true or a big dream, and Qin Pingon needs to choose. And after the 3 dreams of the Fortune Cavern, completely interrupting Qin Pingon's involvement with her is one of the keys to the 4th dream. Cui Yang seems to have deliberately caused Qin Pingon to lose this soul peace, and taught this little brother a principle that all foreign objects in the world are not enough to be the support of a Tao heart." Lu Chen smiled and said, "Xiuhu has a good heart, where can I find such a senior? Do you want one too? Then forget it, don't forget it, those with small arms and legs are mostly no blessings. My brother is very good. As the head teacher of Bai Yujing, it is generally accepted that he has a high level of Taoism and a good temper." Having said that, Yudo, Lu Chen, Qin Pingon, all 3 of them seem to be apprentices on behalf of their seniors. Lu Chen said, "It's almost okay, it's useless to stay here for a long time." Qin Pingon nodded and held the sword in his left hand again. Outside of the corridor world, the culprit handed out more than 20 swords one after another, successfully cutting off the connection between the 12th floors of the 5 cities of Bai Yujing. The culprit of the big demon finally stopped the sword, looked down at the bare bones of the sword-holding hand. A trance expression appeared, and his eyes soon became determined, and he looked up at the side of the Yiluo. "Mr. Bai has finally returned home. Then you can rest assured. Never failed my teacher, never failed my hometown. I just hope that I have never failed Mr. Bai's name. After tens of thousands of years, it doesn't really matter whether we meet or not." The sword cut the void, and out of the clouds and mist ripples a blue-shirt swordsman who hadn't used the magic gesture came out. Standing on the top of Tuya Mountain, the culprit raised the long sword in his hand. "Ask the sword." Qin Pingon nodded. The 2 sides of the confrontation each put away the Dharma and Inshin. The wild world, the first disciple of the great ancestor, the culprit of sword repair. Jianxi Great Wall, the last hidden official, Jianxiu Qin Pingon. The culprit had a tiptoe and passed away from Tuya Mountain in a flash, and went straight to the blue shirt. Suddenly, countless long black and white lines spread across Qin Pingon, and he couldn't move for a moment. It is the line of cause and effect that the previous golden long bridge pierced through the world. This means that Qin Pingon travels long distances time and time again. The more he likes to be more nosy, and the less he takes the cultivator's distance from the world seriously, the more complicated the line of cause and effect arises. Be overwhelmed and overwhelmed. Qin Pingon used his mind to control the night tour of the long sword, cutting as many lines of cause and effect as possible, and at the same time he sacrificed his life, flying sword well, Zhongyue, and tens of thousands of clusters of sword formations, to protect his surroundings, to block the approach of the culprit. Body handing the sword. The sword formation was as crisp as colored glass, splashing in all directions. One person smashed to the front with one sword. The point of the sword pointed directly at the center of Qin Ping's eyebrows, and a golden light came in an instant. With a backhand, Qin Pingon cut the culprit's head diagonally. The next moment Qin Pingyan fell dozens of miles away, and a crack was plowed by Qin Ping's feet on the ground. Even though Qin Pingyan quietly displays Shuayun body, there is still a long golden causal line with the thickness of fingers on his body. The head of the culprit, which should have been cut off, also had an imperceptible sword chi crack. The two sides dissipated almost at the same time, each drawing a bright arc, and then on the battlefield dozens of miles away, the two sides banged their swords together, the wind blew and Qin Pingyan flew out again. The back directly pierced a mountain top that had been smashed before. A sword light fell from the sky, and the sword intent wrapped a golden lightning thick as a mountain, instantly smashing the entire mountain top, and a big pit appeared on the earth. The culprit Yufeng hovered and failed to stab the young hidden official. The culprit frowned slightly and his figure disappeared again. He seemed to shake a sword flower at random. Between the heaven and the earth, a long line of flame and a waterway trajectory suddenly appeared. Dao Jingguang, the wind rushes and finally they are connected end to end to form a circle, and the culprit raises his hand again, like the two rings of sword light, begins to spread two curtains of water and fire, and finally melts into a furnace, which actually merges the two. The avenue is compatible with fire and water. The fire is in the rain and the fire is burning in the long river of time. In the battlefield of thousands of miles of mountains and rivers, the earth is cracking, magma is everywhere and thunder and lightning are intertwined. Qin Pingyan hit the ground violently when he was slashed by the culprit's sword. The ground dented. After all, Qin Pingyan's 14 realms were temporarily borrowed from Lu Qin. Whether it was the refinement and tempering of two natal flying swords or the height of his own kendo, they weren't the 14th realms of pure sword cultivation in the true sense. And intentionally or unintentionally, Qin Pingyan took the initiative to abandon that uninhabited state. Therefore, on the battlefield, every time the sword strikes, the big demon culprit presses on every step. Qin Pingyan suffers more retreats and retreats again and again, and the dust is flying again and again. However, in just a few breaths, the sword light has flashed more than 100 times so that the entire world of thousands of miles, the yellow sand is rolling, covering the sky and the sun. The culprit did not give Qin Pingyan any chance to breathe, and while fighting with the sword he had already performed no less than 30 ancient swordsmanship. And Qin Pingyan only handed out 19 swords. However, Qin Pingyan's sword-handing speed was getting faster and faster, and it seemed that the latter sword was always involved in the former, just like the breath of pure Wufu's breathlessness. After the 20 swords had passed, Qin Pingyan had the upper hand. After a climb, Qin Pingyan just fell on the gate of Tuyue Mountain. Qin Pingyan kept handing his swords all the way faster and faster, so much that he counted his swords. For a sword, Jingguang closed the front line so that the culprit could only parry for the time being without the power to fight back. After the 36 swords, Qin Pingyan did not continue to use the sword, but instead evacuated Tuyue Mountain instantly and replaced it with a sword in his left hand. The culprit stood up from the pool of blood, pieced together the skin and soul. I don't know when Qin Pingyan has already switched to a handheld night tour. Clenching a fist with one hand, bending the 5 fingers, pinching the palms together, and using the palm pattern as a mountain and river talisman, while running 5 zombies, booing into wind and thunder. With a heavy foot on the ground 100 miles around Qin Pingyan's feet instantly turned into a golden mirror, which is still a mysterious thunderstorm in Dragon Tiger Mountain. The master of thunder method is the superposition of thunder method, talisman and formation, which is called thunder game. Outside Longhushan, there is also a Daoist master who holds the thunderboard in his hand, asking God to bring down the truth, dispatch troops and generals, and order Tianding to be the best. The wind and fog, the whip dragon to cause rain, pull up the mountains, drive into the sea. You can also carry large water to land. However, compared with the authentic thunder technique passed down from generation to generation and known as the ancestor of 10,000 laws, it is too inferior. It is rumored that the real thunder game has mastered the general tactics of the ancient thunder divisions, the ultimate technique and the mastery of yin and yang and everything. Prosperity and death, birth and death at 4 o'clock, heaven and earth care about hands, 10,000 transformations arise from body. Using thunder method together he became more and more adept. Lu Qin couldn't help but smile and asked, "It's you from Aquarius who walked to the ruins of the old Dragon City battlefield?" Qin Pingyan nodded, hurrying to take advantage of the high realm all the way south, went to many places, revisited the old place and met some old friends. Once someone like Qin Pingon is truly among the 14th realms, the realm will be extremely solid. After that was a boring tug-of-war. In fact, the culprit was still inexhaustible, and it was almost like a questioning sword, showing off what he had learned in one breath. It's just that on Qin Pingan's side anyway, he changed his sword, and the number of swords increased from 36 consecutive times to nearly 50 swords. In addition, at most, it is a small world of thunder to stabilize the figure in the heart of the Tao, or offering a handful of moon in the well like rain falling on Tuyue Mountain. The battlefield has once again migrated to the foot of Tuyue Mountain. The culprit stood with a sword with his back to Tuyue Mountain. 100 miles away from Tuyue Mountain, Qin Pingan held a night tour in his hand. Qin Pingan suddenly raised his head and glanced at the sky beyond the two heavens and earth. A round of bright moon was dragged to travel far. It seemed that a figure was shot down to the world, but she quickly stopped the fall and returned to the bright moon with a sword back and forth in the same way. The route was not bad at all. For an instant Qin Pingan was totally different. A mountain that was uprooted by the culprit's sword tactics command, moved horizontally and smashed it towards Qin Pingan. But this time Qin Pingan was completely indifferent, just moved forward without any haste, and a hill close at hand shattered on its own. An arc of sword light also stopped a few feet away. Sparks shot, fire and rain everywhere, and scorched earth all around. Since then, almost every few steps Qin Pingan walked towards Tuyue Mountain, a sword or spell burst nearby. Always standing in an invincible place, no one in front of him, invincible posture. Yanachu Yueshan, the culprit of the big demon, asked both the sword and the question in the heart. Why monasticism? On the road you can go straight with the sword without detours. The green shirt gradually turned into a bright red robe. Even the 14-realm Dao law failed to prevent this change. The young hidden official seemed to be returning to half of the great wall of sword qi, his face blurred and erratic. The face and body are thousands of silk threads crisscrossing each other. And those golden long lines of cause and effect that spread are like the gilded color of a layer of idols. The culprit of the big demon slashed down at the young hidden official who had started climbing. As a result, the miraculous existence gradually approached, just raising one hand, let the long sword in the culprit's hand hover still, because the castration was so fierce that the culprit's sword-holding wrist broke on the spot. Maintaining that slashing posture, the culprit's body form staggered forward. Qin Pingan handed it out with a sword. Very simple sword cut sores. Lu Chen's eyes widened suddenly. He was really dumbfounded and his face was strange. I saw Qin Pingan with another golden eye standing on the top of the mountain just behind the culprit. Holding a golden long sword, gently wiped the culprit's neck. After that long sword crosscut, what time the long river and the great formation, what kind of way to support the moon mountain, are all useless and vain methods. Cut off the head. The head was caught in his hands again. Sword in one hand, head in one hand. Lu Chen widened his eyes and asked, "Is that you?" The man smiled and replied, "It's me." Qin Pingan put the long sword into the scabbard, hoarsely said, "Of course it is me." Lu Chen stared blankly for a long time, looking at Qin Pingan, who was present with pure divine nature, and Qin Pingan, who took the initiative to strip his divinity away. Lu Chen finally sighed and fell back to the ground, pretending to be dead. The two Qin Pingan merged into one. As for the culprit of the great demon at the pinnacle of the Ascension realm, the two souls of heaven and earth have been smashed by a single sword, and the human soul, carrying the 7 souls, began to drift away like ashes. The whole Tuyue mountain at the foot began to show a kind of withered white. The culprit maintained the last trace of clarity, and there was only a man in yellow clothes standing by the illusory illusion. There was no grief or unwillingness but a relief. The first disciple of the great ancestor of Tuyueshan, who is the real name Yuanji, has practiced in this life without complaints and regrets. He still can't hold Tuyueshan to the best of his ability. Although he has regrets, he has a clear conscience and no need to paint the ground as a prison. It is not a relief. The culprit smiled and said, "Qin Pingan, I just take my head to the Great Wall of Jianqi so I can tell several worlds with this." Qin Pingan shook his head and gently placed the head of the great demon culprit on the top of Tuyue Mountain. "Choose to stay here. If this ascendant realm peak, it didn't end as a pure sword repairer. Then don't talk about a big head, the demon pill will figure it out for you." Tuyue Mountain, a savage world, began to show signs of falling apart. The culprit turned his head and glanced at Qin Pingan. He seemed surprised by the young hidden official's choice, but soon he was not surprised at all. The culprit finally sat cross-legged, patted his head, looked into the distance, smiled and said, "Qin Pingan, isn't it a little invincible? A copy of the 14 realms obtained out of thin air, the long sword that is more powerful than the sky, and the existence of pure divinity." A bright red robe swayed in the wind on this mountain, hunting and hunting. But his face and body are beginning to return to normal. Qin Pingan said, "If I were your age you would not see me in this questioning sort today." The culprit laughed loudly. After that the two sides stopped talking. The man in yellow finally glanced at the world in his hometown. He slowly raised his hand and gave a thumbs up to the young human swordsman beside him. Qin Pingan raised his head and looked at the moon in the sky. Took a long time to look back. "I was worried that she would not be able to enter the 5 realms for a long time, and that she would be dangerous in a brand new world, and worried that after she became Yupu realm, the burden on her shoulders would be heavier and he was not around. Worried about her being the number 1 in the world, and worried that she would be the number 1 in the world. Probably this is what I like. Let a person be different from himself. Can make optimists pessimistic, can make pessimists optimistic. I can see hope from the desperate situation and have the courage to look forward to the future. Can make a poor young man in a poor alley suddenly feel that he is the richest person in the world. Let a strawshoe boy who can't even write the word sword, cross the mountains and the sea, practice boxing silently for millions, and silently tell himself that he must become a great sword fairy." Lu Chen said, "Don't worry, the problem is not big. Even if the procrastination fails, no one will be a wasteful trip." After that there was silence in pairs. Only the mountain breeze blows if there is sobs. All over the barren world, after Bai Zhe ordered the hibernator to wake up. In the wild hinterland, a 1,000-mile glacier that had been frozen for thousands of years suddenly began to melt. Suddenly, a graceful and unwieldy woman appeared. Her real body seemed to be the entire ice field. She stretched her waist, raised her palms, yawned and sniffed, crossing thousands of miles in one step to a majestic city, pursing her mouth, and the blood of all the creatures in the city instantly converged. A long river of blood was drunk by her like a drink. A demon clan of the upper 5 realms and a few earth immortal monks tried to escape from this purgatory with their own destiny. With a few fingers of her, they broke up the primordial spirit and several blood flowers bloomed in the air. A mountain gate with a long history that can only barely maintain the head of the zone. A wall map of the Patriarch Hall in the center is not a statue of a monk of the ancestors of the past, but an ancient mountain and river map, drawing a tragic battle in an ancient battlefield. A body of the great demon, under its feet is a large corpse of a golden god. Then the hanging statues began to vibrate violently. This vision of the ancestors' manifestation made the ancestors go up and down, one by one, the old monks who are qualified to worship in the ancestor hall, and those young monks knelt inside and outside the ancestor hall. Crazy kowtow. In the picture scroll, an unremarkable corpse of the monster race suddenly jumped up, looking stiff, looking around, and then walked out a young monk. He picked a chair and sat down, reached out and grabbed it, unscrewed the head of an old monk and put it and chewed hard in his mouth. Anyway, these later generations of ants belonging to their own Dao lineage have been worshipping the wrong incense for thousands of years, not a capital crime. In addition, in a small school built in a certain blessed land in the wild, a young man suddenly tilted his head, his eyes were pitch black and he was startled. At the same time, the savage world was everywhere, and the 8 immortal ranks that had long belonged to each other had cut off the Master's avenue at the same time, and finally flew away in one direction. In an instant it caused serious injuries to 7 wild cultivators of the upper 5 realms, and one of them, a young earth fairy who was regarded as the proud child of heaven, died on the spot. In addition, there are several visions in the wild places, one after another in the world. On the side of Tuyue Mountain, there was a constant loud noise of mountain cracks. It was like the echo of the world after a questioning sword, harmonizing with the wind. Lu Chen finally broke the silence and asked, "Is the price too high?" Qin Pingan leaned on the ground with a long sword, suddenly bent over and lowered his head, tremblingly stretched out a hand, 5 fingers like a hook, stretched out his hand and covered his face. Close one eye and one golden eye pupil. When Lu Chen was scared, he only knew nothing. After a while, Qin Pingan raised his head and smiled and said, "The realm or something, the more you drink, the more you get." Lu Chen wanted to say something but stopped. He was not just talking about realm. Once he withdrew the Dao Fa, Qin Pingon would immediately fall. The Qi practitioner fell from the Yupu realm to the Yuanying, and the martial arts fell from the level of Guizhen. Although the questioning sword this time, the successful sword-slashing ascendant realm, the benefits are not small, but the sequelae are also large, such as the demons that need to face to re-enter the Yupu realm. It's not a joke to say that the Dao is 1 foot high and the devil is 1 foot high. Let alone the battle between humanity and divinity. Maybe this is Xianxia? This is Xianxia? Sure enough, he is not suitable for practicing swords. He was almost moved by Dao Chang's son before. Lu Chen reminded, Qin Pingan make a discussion really can't fight anymore. With another similar questioning sword, Lu Chen really wanted to worry that he would have to confess to the wild world. Qin Pingan nodded, I'm back. Sword of Coming Chapter 868. Long Lost Chapter. In the Wild March, the Jade Hook has fallen into the world. The old master of Toad Palace is already far away in Hauran, and this round of Mingyue has become a land without an owner. And the bright moon that once hung in the center of the Hao Kai, there is a deadly ancient fairy palace ruins. It seems that it has experienced a war of spells to reach the sky, covering a vast area of mansions hundreds of endless years in the past. The building seems to have been razed to the ground in one go, leaving only the foundation. Even if a few sword repairmen including Qi Tingji took the initiative to drag the moon, the ruins were still the same. And it was not until Bai Zhe appeared in Luluo that there was a huge upheaval. A huge spider that occupies nearly 1/3 of the territory of the bright moon. After breaking out of the ground, it instantly turned into a human form, a rickety old man's appearance, and then opened his mouth and inhaled, as if all the moonlight was inhaled into the abdomen and then vomited. Is a long sword. It was this ancient monster sword repairman who smashed Ning Yao who was responsible for opening the way into the world with a sudden sword. After that, Ning Yao returned to the battlefield with a sword, and smashed it back into the nest in the depths of the moon. It raised its head and glanced at the incomparably fierce little lady, running a natal supernatural power, investigating the fiction and reality, a bit incredulous, a human sword repairer who is less than 100 years old? This ancient great demon couldn't help using that ancient language, cursing and cursing Bai Zhe for not doing things authentically. In my mind, is it possible that the sword cultivation after thousands of years, the cultivation qualifications, and the realm of swordsmanship are so terrible? What can you do if you wake up? Don't stand up at all, right? It quickly became happy and looked at the other sword repairs. It was okay. Although the realm was high, it was not young compared to the murderous little girl. Wasn't it about to be beaten? Without saying anything, it performed a natal escape technique, passing through the entire bright moon directly from the old nest. And then looking up surprised, hey, why is the wild moon missing a round of bright moon? Then choose that Toad Palace. A white light instantly implicated Haotsai and Chan Palace. As a result, the woman turned out to be reluctant, and the sword light scattered and gathered a few times, and then the sword directly bypassed the half round of the moon. The speed of the sword light was unreasonable. She stopped the way and asked, where are you going? Since both sides are sword repairers, it is naturally not enough to just ask for a sword. The little old man squinted his eyes and smiled. The little girl has such a grumpy temper, be careful not to find a Daoist companion. The old man's words are quite different from today's wild and elegant words. Ning Yao reluctantly listened to the general meaning. Ning Yao was too lazy to talk nonsense. Just about to hand the sword, she suddenly shifted her vision and looked far behind the old man. It's a guy who came from Yufeng. Ning Yao breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out that Qin Pingan did not directly return to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, but instead holding a moon-running charm he first arrived at the Toad Palace and Mingyue, where the weather was relatively stable, and then followed the spider line that seemed to build a bridge between 2 months while offering sacrifices again. A symbol of the moon rushing out finally came here. Qin Pingan's face was pale at the moment, his hands were sleeved, like a sick seedling that had not healed from a serious illness. Standing on that spider line at the moment, his figure swaying slightly, smiled and said, just here, no need to look for it. He looked at the ancient great demon at the peak of the ascending realm, and used the depths of the bright moon as a hiding place to inhabit and heal his wounds. Qin Pingan smiled at Ning Yao and said in his heart, don't worry about me, just keep dragging the moon. Ning Yao nodded, and without hesitation he returned to the previous road, and continued to shoot his sword non-stop to stabilize the open road. She couldn't help turning her head and looking back. Ning Yao found out that Qin Pingon was watching her. It may be that he has a sharp heart. It may have been watching her. Ning Yao was responsible for opening the way with his sword, and with his sword aura and sword intent, he maintained the gate that connected the wild and blue world. This move is similar to the ascent of the old sword fairy. Qi Tingji appeared in the face of the law and enveloped his sword aura over the territory of the moon, like a rope, dragging forward in front of the moon. The criminal officer Haosu, in the midst of a bright moon, sacrificed his life sword Chan Wan, silver frost thousands of miles, blending with the moonlight, and at the same time handing the sword, attacking and defending, jointly blocking this round of Haotsai and the Wild World Avenue towing. Lu Ji was at the rear, offering a natal flying sword, Baopu, plus the 8 swords in a wooden box given by Master Lu for free, and he only used the sword to chop the moon and push it forward. The 4 sword repairmen of the Great Wall of Jianqi, dragging the moon, have an orderly division of labor and each perform their duties. Haosu was relatively close to Qi Tingji, and the 2 sides could barely communicate with each other and asked, "Should I slaughter this ancient monster?" Qi Tingji shook his head and smiled. "Since the hidden official hasn't spoken, it's not a problem." The big demon twisted his wrist, then walked around behind his back like a sword. He smiled. "You really want to fight? The chances of winning, naturally you are more powerful, bigger, but you have to carefully plan to fail." Several sword repairmen worked together to move to the Mingyue. It had no idea Bai Zhe didn't care about it. It still cares about it. His mother, "I slept soundly for thousands of years. When I woke up I was startled by a little girl and then watched a flirtation that is more silent than sound." Earlier on Tuyue Mountain, the 3rd head teacher Bai Yujing was still worried, and now he said again, "Cheat him. See who is better at bluffing." "Just now," Lu Chen suddenly said with a serious face, "Be careful of Bai Zhe. I knew I shouldn't have come here to join in the fun." "It's just that," Lu Chen smiled again quickly. "It seems you don't need to be careful. Fortunately, join in the fun. Poor Tao is quite prescient." Above the city, Wei Jin was refining the ancient sword intent. Chao Junmei called Tao Dao, but in fact he practiced unintentionally. Because this great sword Immortal of Fengxue Temple Xianxia has actually entered a state. So near the 2 sword repairmen alone, there was a heavy snowfall of dull goose feathers. Chao Jun had nothing to do, so he squatted on the top of the city, piled up a tall snowman, looks very handsome, and piled a few palm-sized old thrown big monsters, took out 2 pairs of green bamboo chopsticks from the square inch, and helped looking at the handsome swordsman who is bound to be excellent in swordsmanship within 100 years. Each dangles a sword at his waist, and then the snowman holds the sword in both hands and holds the head of a throne respectively, probably asking them whether they are afraid. Chao Jun turned his head and glanced at Wei Jin, which was like an old monk entering Ding, a 40-year-old sword fairy in the Yupu realm. After that he strengthened his kendo by killing monsters at the Great Wall of Jianqi, and after returning to his hometown at the age of Jiazi he was among the fairyland. I heard that a Liang once helped him break the bottleneck of the nascent soul realm. He pointed out swordsmanship here and there. The boss Zhou Xian lost his sword book and finally returned to the Great Wall of Sword Qi and received a few strands of Zhong Yuan's pure sword intent. Envy or not? I don't even know a Liang, and I have broken my Dao Xian with a few swords. The boss Zhou Xian praised the fearful future generations, and Zhong Yuan's pure sword intent is not rare to take care of himself. Helpless but helpless. Wei Jin suddenly opened his eyes and looked up at the sky. Chao Jun followed Wei Jin's gaze, looked up and rubbed his eyes. In the field of vision, a big moon gradually showed a huge outline moving slowly. It is estimated that the whole barren world to the south will have to be watched again for another round. The 5 swordsmen of Tonggizong Yu Xin Wang Shizi, Li Wanyong, Du Yen and Qin Shuihu. After they left the Jianqi Great Wall site, they traveled together and went straight to the Sun Pendant to visit the Daisong Chongjing and Yuguazong Wing. So I missed the opportunity to witness the old sword fairy making a sword up close. The group just stopped halfway, looking back at the sword's spirit on the northern city head like a rainbow. Qin Shuihu said with a smile, who was in a hurry before, stand up. Even if they were far away, a line of Jianxiu could still feel the vast sword aura of rushing bullfighting. Li Wan was dazzled and shook, exhaling a long breath, rubbing his face vigorously. Probably only this sword can be worthy of the 3 characters, the purest. Du Yan's eyes trembled and he muttered, "In our life we have practiced swords for 100,000 years, even if it is longer, can we finally hand out such a sword?" Even if there's only one sword in this life, it's good. Master Wang said. In fact, Mr. Zhu's swordsmanship is the closest to the old sword fairy. As soon as they mentioned the left and right, several elders all looked at the only woman. Turn a deaf ear to your heart. In fact, at the Great Wall of Jianqi, it was not bad to not be able to see Mr. Zhu. Can't bear to be in a dilemma. She then laughed at herself. How could Mr. Zhu feel embarrassed because of his unrequited love for children? Mr. Zhu, it will only make the Hauran world and the wild world embarrass each other. Qin Sanqiu and Dai Zhang followed Xiao Yunyan and Mrs. Yan Yan, together with the 18 swords of the Dragon Elephant Sword sect, to the ferry to the south. When the old sword fairy traveled far away from the Great Wall of Sword Qi, he deliberately slowed down his figure, looked down and nodded to Qin Sanqiu and Dai Zhang. The two young juniors were forced to look up and then only had a glimpse, and the old sword Immortal disappeared. After Ma Kuxuan had beaten someone, he clapped his hands and felt refreshed. The most interesting thing is that the grief-stricken old Yuan Ying, looking up at the sky, shouted, "Master He, is it possible that this fellow will hurt people wantonly?" The Confucian temple who sits on the canopy of the Confucian temple who accompanies the saints, did not speak with his heart and directly said, "I am not here." Ma Kuxuan laughed when he heard this and never thought that he Fuzi who was qualified to eat cold pork head was quite funny. No longer paying attention to the pitiful genealogist, Ma Kuxuan went to Yu Shiwu and sat there. Gao Ming asked, "Old Ma, tell you something?" Ma Kuxuan smiled and said, "If you have any fart, just let it go." Gao Ming asked, "Can I switch to Luopa Mountain and be a disciple of Qin Pingon? I think that if I go there, I might have a better chance of getting along with the hermit." The maidservant counted the verses and the young brothers looked at each other. They all knew that this young man would either shut up and didn't speak as long as he didn't talk. He just didn't expect to be so bold and dare to say anything. Gao Ming lowered his head and touched the beloved hatchet and said to himself, "At least you have a face when you go out. It's not like following the old horse. You go north and south and the fairy master on the mountain you meet, regardless of male or female, looks strange in my eyes." "Master, how do you say that sentence?" Yu Shiwu smiled and said, "The upper beam is not straight and the lower beam is crooked." Gao Ming nodded vigorously, "Yes. If you can't choose where to reincarnate, it's almost the same as apprenticeship, so just accept your fate obediently." Ma Kuxuan laughed instead of anger and smiled openly. Didn't seem to be a fake. He touched the young man's head. "Besides, Master didn't treat you too badly. He said that he would take you up the mountain to practice as a god and follow me to eat and drink. Spicy, I did both things." Gao Ming thought for a while, nodded and said, "That's true." At the beginning the boy was in the small town restaurant. Before he ran away he did not forget to take the hatchet in his hand and wipe the blood on the corpse. In fact, the fellow villagers did not drive him away, nor did they complain about him hacking people and causing serious disasters. Probably because this stupid son who grew up together is the heaviest in fights and he likes to be at the forefront. But when the teenagers saw the guilty conscience, fear and timidity in their eyes, they felt quite boring. If Ma Kuxuan and his party did not show up, he would continue to hang around with his fellow villagers. After all, he had no other place to go. But since Ma Kuxuan said at the time he could go up the mountain to be a god, the hatchet boy wanted to know what it is. Gao Ming asked curiously, "Lao Ma, aren't you and Qin Pingon from the same hometown? Why are you better? You said that you provoke someone is not good, so you want to provoke him." Ma Kuxuan raised his hands, hugged the back of his head, squinted and said with a smile, "Among my peers it seems that I beat him twice?" The young man raised his head and exclaimed, "The old horse, you are very okay, you can be regarded as having a beautiful scene." Ma Kuxuan pointed at Yu Shiwu, "But the person who really makes Qin Pingon jealous now is your uncle Yu. Alone 3 martial arts. The true sense of the God's asylum." Yu Shiwu looked at the juniors, shook his head and smiled, "Do you really believe it? The maidservant Xu Dian and the disciple Wangzu will be suspicious." Only the hatchet boy nodded and said, "Believe it, why don't you believe it?" Yu Shiwu smiled and turned his head to look south. In his eyes, all spiritual beings in the world are like ants in life and death, but as beautiful as gods. The Middle-earth Confucian temple in a secret landscape of Gongdalin, the sword repairs Lu Cha from a wild beard and heroic man to an angler obsessed with fishing. It's really easy to catch things like fishing. Lu Cha pays more and more attention to fishing, so I won't mention the fishing rod and fish basket. In addition, the choice of fishing position, hook fishing line, bottom fishing float and cake bait raising nests are all learned. Now Lu Cha Tao Fa has made countless advancements and the door is clear. Of course, the premise is that Lu Cha deliberately suppresses his cultivation and uses the eyes and strength of a common master to fish here. Otherwise there will be no fun at all. Today's catch is quite good. Lu Cha cooked a pot of fish soup for himself. He asked for some firewood, rice, oil and salt from the Confucian temple. He planned to buy some fish fry and put it in the lake. If the Confucian temple is all detained and searched, then Lu Cha just spend money to buy it and the fish fry money and the travel expenses are paid out. The demon of the old throne looked up and was imprisoned in a sparsely populated group of volcanoes. According to legend, it was once an alchemy furnace for Dao ancestors. A woman in Jingchai's sarong with a plain appearance suddenly opened a wine shop in a secluded place near the water and backing the mountain. She usually doesn't even have a ghost guest, so she doesn't care. Li Xing only agreed with her about one thing, except that she must not cross the boundary, that is, not hurt people's lives. Besides, she can come and go freely in places of thousands of miles. Today those who came here to drink gathered for an unprecedented time. It was a vassal and elegant master mountain god and a girl-like river woman. In addition, the two of them were all well-made mountain monsters. It's just that these four drinkers didn't know the details of Yangji. They just regarded the wine shop proprietress as a little water spirit who cultivated. Today Yangji sat alone at a wine table and flipped through a new book that Howren had long banned. There was a fable about the killing of two snakes which made Yangji quite embarrassed. The mountain master at the table next door still brags over there that the big demon is looking up to the stinky lady, and now she is under his own jurisdiction. He inspects somewhere in the crater twice a day and the wife and aunt are frightened. Don't dare to look at yourself. The river girl put her cheeks in her hands and looked sadly at the yellow sand land outside, saying that when a woman marries a woman, it means rapeseed fate, and where it is bitter. A warrior who never left a name for doing good deeds in Beiju Luzhou, at a ferry crossing of the Immortal family, he spent money to buy a book of immortal swordsmanship, originally thought that the price was cheap and used it to play the luminous shade, but he never imagined that he would be surprised. Because turning to one of the pages, the base of a seal is the 3 tricks. Seeing Du Ye's eyes lit up, this hidden officer was also a wonderful person. If the good seniors traveled far to the Great Wall of Jianqi, they would definitely be able to talk. The old coachman found Aunt Feng at the fire temple in the capital. She was still sitting drunk on the steps of the flower shed, hiccuping. The old coachman muffled, "What is going on?" Before the great capital city, there was such a big noise inexplicably. If you start in the Ascendant realm, if you are not careful, it will be the 14th realm in the legend. Although the amazing weather is fleeting, but for their old antiques with a long time, the more they can be retracted and put, the more they look high. Aunt Feng smiled and said, "Finally know you are afraid?" The old coachman sneered with arms around his chest. "Of course I am afraid. What's so terrible about who is afraid of things? Besides, there are no outsiders here." Aunt Feng made no secret of her schadenfreude, shook the hip flask and joked, "It's fine for outsiders to look at flowers in the mist. We are all old people who have been watching the young people in the Liju cave with our own eyes and growing up step by step. How can we be so careless? Then if you give me a word to that kid, he'll say I'm counseling and promise to deter when I see him in the future. I don't know how to go. It's better not to get angry when you see that kid." The main reason is that the kid is not kind and doesn't give any chance to disagree at all. Before, the two sides just met each other, and when they met, they formed a beam. The old coachman became more and more aggrieved as he spoke and stretched out his hand. Am idle, come to a pot of 100 flowers stuff." In some accidents, Aunt Feng really gave a pot. It's so atmospheric today. Aunt Feng smiled and said, "I'm not afraid of the thief stealing, I'm afraid the thief is thinking." On the way between the wild land and a round of bright moon, a little light suddenly bloomed. It turned out that Bai Zhe emptied the long river of time, set off from the side of the Luyuo, and finally stopped the 4 sword repairers from dragging the moon. Bai Zhe offered a statue of Dharma, and his white clothes was dangling. Only a big hand of Dharma can hold a bright moon. In just an instant from the Great Wall of Jianqi, someone quietly set off and climbed into the sky in one step, showing the same height and majesty, wearing a Confucian shirt. Hold Bai Zhe Faxiang's head with one hand, press it down suddenly and push it back into the world. Bai Zai Faxiang dissipated, only to appear in a better place in the sky again out of thin air, and punched the head of that Confucian shirt Faxiang, which was a fierce blow. The Confucian shirt style exploded. The next moment he appeared behind Bai Zai Faxiang and broke the latter's neck. A vast world, a wild world. The weather is shaking. A seemingly simple fighting technique that is not on the mountain at all. In fact, the aftermath of the two sides Taoism has already surged into the Qingming world. The ancient great demon's mind was shaking and he slipped away, otherwise he would wait for his death here. It didn't even dare to go to the Toad Palace, but hid its body and fell straight into the world. Damn, it turned out to be the worst-tempered and most capable little master. Sort of Coming Chapter 869. At the beginning, Qin Pingan borrowed a few books from Qin Tianjian, and did not go back to Renyuniyun building or the inn. Instead he walked directly to the outer wall of the capital and saw a ferry boat hanging over the border of Jiangyi, with 2 strands on it. The dragon aura is very strong. The real dragon is Zhigui the King Song Mu. Like in the middle of the night, there are 2 big lanterns in the yard next to Ni Ping Lane. It is difficult to not see it. Qin Pingan took another step and directly boarded the heavily guarded ferry. At the same time he took out the 3rd-class consecration card and held it high. A military commander in armor and a knife, and a few monks who accompanied the army had formed a half-moon circle. Obviously, expelling visitors was the first priority. When they saw the innocent card issued by the Ministry of Punishment, they didn't start immediately. The general asked in a deep voice, "Who is here?" The monk in front of him with a blue shirt and long gown is calm and relaxed. "I always feel like I've seen it somewhere but I just can't remember it." A kind-eyed old monk said, Please report the name of the Immortal Master, and the ferry needs to be recorded." With one hand in his sleeve he quietly twisted a golden talisman. "As for whether the enshrined master will stay in the ferry, I still can't guarantee anything. Fair King Song Mu, Prince Song Su and Minister of Rights Zhao Yu, now all of them are on the ferry. Who dares to take it lightly?" Qin Pingan's self-registration number, Luopashan Qin Pingan. The general was stunned for a moment, and then he immediately asked, "Is it the Master Qin Shan who almost killed the tortoises of Xingyang Mountain?" Qin Pingan also froze for a moment, then smiled and nodded. "If there is no accident, it should be me. Xingyang Mountain, the smoky mountain top of the Immortal family, only pays money, hardly really contributes much, let alone people, except for a handful of sword repairs who went to the battlefield of Old Dragon City to emerge. The other so-called the sword fairy embryo, who dares to love, is all going down the mountain and playing in the mountains anyway. Where to go safely, the military side of Dai, but all the generals who lead the war will see it seriously and naturally they look down on Xingyang Mountain. The upper eye. So the ceremony at Luopa Mountain was very pleasant." The general smiled, waved his hand, removed the fairy encirclement, then clasped his fist and said, "Master Qin Shan did not carry his sword today and he didn't recognize him. It's offensive to guard the ferry where he is responsible. This is the end of the general. Go down and report to King Luo." The place where Song Mu was entrusted with the king was Luozhou, and the Guluoshui was also one of the birthplaces of the later Dadu in central China. This general is actually a boring gourd. I never imagined that I don't have a smile today. He took the initiative to introduce himself. "My name is Liao Jun. I used to be General Su's command. I was born as A and was inferior. I'm not talking about it. I'm friends with Guaniran. It's a pity that I missed the Master Qin Shan at the Shujian Lake back then. I often heard Yu Shanfeng and Qi Qi mentioning Master Qin Shan. The amount of alcohol was invincible. After a meal I could sit down. It is considered that Lord Qin Shan has not had a good time. Is actually a weird thing. It is reasonable to say that Qin Pingan didn't deliberately display blindness when he just boarded the ship. Since Liao Jun had seen the beautiful scene, he definitely shouldn't fail to recognize the young mountain owner of the Luopa Mountain. This is the result of Lu Chen's Dao Fa. Qin Pingan has not completely digested the Dao Yun and Dao Qi at the moment, so that he is walking in this world like a boat that is not tied to the world, the body and the world. The well water does not violate the river water. Therefore, in the matter of morality, let outsiders naturally look at flowers in the mist. After Qin Pingan reported the mountain gate and name in the eyes of others, it became as if he remembered this person in an instant. Otherwise I would never want to keep the cloud open to see the moon. Earlier, Dao Ancestor rode an ox to visit the small town. This is even more so. Dao Ancestor did not want anyone to know his whereabouts, so he would know everything. Qin Pingon laughed with his heartfelt voice. I have a fair amount of alcohol, but the wine is not bad. Unlike some people, I make false moves and shake my hands when I lift the bowl. Every time I evacuate the wine table, I can raise fish by my feet. That Liao Jun was very relieved and laughed heartily. He didn't suffer from that guy in Guaniran's hands. He gathered the sound to form a line and whispered to the witty young sword fairy. It is estimated that our Guanzhongzhong is meant to be. Because of Qi Xiang's birth, I naturally dislike the taste of Shujian Lake's drinks, so it's better to drink horse urine as good as I'm used to. A Jigue wearing a snow-white robe stood on the top floor of the ferry, squinting at the man in the blue shirt who had previously been in the Dadu temple. She is very annoyed by Qin Pingan's approachability and being kind to others. It seems that I can chat with anyone. In the eyes of such people there seems to be something beautiful. If it's a disguise, that's it. It's not. Qin Pingan raised his head and smiled and asked, as the newly promoted Sihai King, now the water is responsible for betting on the dart, you are not afraid of the Confucian Temple's accountability? If I remember correctly, the gods and spirits on the top of the Dali Jinyu genealogy table, it's not an iron rice bowl that cannot be beaten. After that discussion in the Confucian Temple, various measures have been continuously adopted, which have been spread throughout the Haoran Jiuzhou through the Shanshui Dibao. I only talk about the evaluation, promotion and relegation of the gods of mountains and rivers. The secular dynasty under the mountain, part of the power of the gods to be canonized, handed over to the Confucian Temple, more like a bureaucrat of the imperial court. On the side of Dai Yonghua, the of water of the Tiefu River, fills up the temporarily vacant position of Chang Chunhao. But being able to go out to take charge of one party and serve as the chief official in the territorial territory is a reuse. The old Jiao in Fengshui cave of Qiantang River in Beipingzu has just filled in the lack of Uncle Lily from the three princes of Chidu, and of course it is even a promotion. Huang Tinghua, whose real name is Cheng Longzhou, was transferred to the head of the Confucian Academy and went to the Dafu Academy in Tonggishao. Each has its own good fortune. Jigue sneered. If I remember correctly, Qin Shanju did not serve in the Lily department. Could it be that the discussion, the Confucian Temple's meritorious deeds and rewards, won a high position in real power that matches the identity of the context? So it can be managed? Is it so wide? Qin Pingan smiled and said, I'm a neighbor for many years at any rate. I can't remind you too much. I can't listen to the habit of others to persuade me, so I will change it later. It's just reading a few books, so you have to change the habit of being a teacher. If you want me to say you still did not study before, which is more pleasing. Jigue smiled and said, it's good that year. Being scolded at the Iron Lockwell can make people angry for several days. Both of them are from the young generation of Lizhu Dongtian with simple folk customs. They only speak one word, which can be regarded as the same patriarch hall. Jigue squinted those golden eyes and asked in his heart, 14 realms? Where did it come from? She is already ascending. As the only real dragon in the world, she is also a great monk in the ascending realm who is carrying the luck of the dragon. Compared with ordinary mountain monks, her eyesight is naturally better. Qin Pingan said, you borrowed someone from someone and you happen to know that person. Jigue snorted, obviously not believing Qin Pingan's statement. Suddenly she narrowed a pair of long and narrow eyes. Lu Dao Chong. Almost called him by name. She seemed to find a handle and tapped her finger on the railing. Tusk, I know that I have turned my enemies into friends, and they all say that the 18th woman has changed, but it has changed its appearance. It is Qin Shanju who has changed even more. As expected, it is often far away. The traveling master Qin Shan, sure enough, as long as a man has money he is great. Qin Pingan didn't care and asked, do you know Mr. Sanshan Joho? GK smiled and said, how do you know, so what if you don't know? She has a jade-white palm with blue veins on the back of her hand. It is obvious that she bit her teeth with hatred for Mr. Sanshan Joho, and she was scared to the bone. Jinju Mountain is the place where the Lizhu held by the true dragon of Jigue in the past, and the stream that was commonly known as Longshu Creek by the local people, was later elevated into a river. It is one of the veritable dragon's whiskers. On the main street of the town, 2 dragon beards disappeared. In addition, Fulu Street and Taoya Lane are the dragon neck and a section of the dragon's spine respectively. In the entire Fulu Street, every mansion is a symbol of victory, and every peach tree on Taoya Lane is like it was a trapped dragon nail, and it worked together to trap a real dragon with bare bones in place, unable to move at all. There are dozens of dragon kills in the small town where experts carefully search for dragons and acupuncture points. The kiln is known as the 1,000-year-old kiln. For Zhigui, it is tantamount to a continuous fire for cooking. The boiling water soup, the fire of karma, is poured into the soul. Qin Pingon reminded, "Don't forget that you were able to escape from the iron lock well in the past, and then you can walk around the world freely in a human skin because of whom. If you follow the earliest rules made by the saints of the 3 religions of the Liju cave in heaven, this is an extralegal favor, and there is also the suspicion of trespassing." Zhigui blinked. Of course it's because Qi Jingchun is unfavorable for guards, otherwise what else? Qin Pingon turned his head slightly, listening in a vertical ear and smiling. "What did you say? I didn't hear you clearly. Say it again?" Zhiqiu leaned over the railing and said with a smile, "You count the elder, let me say it again, you must say it." Being a neighbor for so many years, she knows exactly what Qin Ping's character is. On his side as a bad guy, anyone can speak and do without restraint. Anyway, he is a poor worm who is accustomed to being spineless and pierced when he was young. There is no need to worry that he will hold revenge, let alone get revenge. Most people even have good rewards. He doesn't believe it. He believes that evil has its retribution. He is not afraid of ghosts when he is a child. But he is a coward who dares not do any bad things and dare not have bad intentions, but only in certain things do not cross the boundary. When Zhigui saw Lu Xianying the first time he saw it, he didn't like him. Real dragons in the world were born against scales. Because Lu Xianying's ancestors were proficient in the techniques of disturbing dragons, gut perches, and slashing dragons. For Lu Xianying, a descendant of a dragon breeder, Zhike possesses a hatred that comes from Dao's heart. At that time, Lu Xianying was a real mundane master, ignorant of this, and Tianwan led the red line, just as Zhigui disgusted that he had no money. Song Jisun walked out of the cabin, followed by Prince Dai Song Su, Minister Zhao Shilang of the Ministry of Rites, and the young girl who turned over the box and turned a good harvest. But when Yu saw the sword fairy in Qingshan who likes to smile and kill people, he immediately went to bitter gourd. Face up. Although he is not the one in front of him, he is still him after all. In those few games she dragged her and turned around with a heart-wrenching elbow, hitting her blood violently. Otherwise she stretched out her hand and held down the front door and pulled out all her soul. What's more, among the Dali earthly branch monks she is considered to have ended well, and some of them are even worse. Thinking of these bad things that could not bear to look back, Yu felt that the drinks on the ferry were still lacking. Song Jisun smiled and asked, "Is something wrong with me?" Qin Pingon asked, "Didn't you find me something?" Song Jisun nodded, "Then go sit inside and talk." Zhao Yu and all 3 of them stayed behind, letting the 2 neighbors in Mud Bottle Alley reminisce about their past. In a room, Qin Pingon and Song Jisun sat opposite each other. Zhigui crossed the threshold and did not take a seat. Standing behind Song Jisun, she was a maid. In the small town in her hometown, according to the custom, most women don't eat. Those who serve the table, and as long as they are married aunts and aunts, there is no way to worship the ancestors to the grave. Song Jisun said straightforwardly, "Don't kill, this is my bottom line, otherwise I will break my wrist with you and Luopishen no matter what the price is." Qin Pingon said, "Song Mu, you have to figure out one thing first. It's not that I embarrass her, but she is embarrassing me." Zhigui smiled and said, "The son is too worried. How can a good person kill someone? At most you can say a few things and you can go away with a little lesson." Song Jisun stared at the Qin Pingon, shook his head and said, "Repaying virtue with virtue and resentment. Repaying virtue with resentment is a real villain, and resentment with virtue is a hypocrite. This is not my doctrine but the teachings of the Holy Master." Qin Pingon turned his head and said to Zhigui, "Don't stay here for outsiders." Zhigui shook his head like a rattle and said, "First, I am not an outsider, and secondly, I am not a human." Song Jisun said, "Zhigui, you should leave for a while." Jukyu pouted his mouth, his figure dissipated out of thin air. Qin Pingon suddenly raised one hand and moved his fingers together to make a sword technique. The next moment, Zhigui was forced to leave the house and return to the corridor on the top floor. She pressed her thumb against her cheek, and there was a slight blood mark wounded by the sword gas. It is really the 14th realm in the legend. Song Jisun poured 2 bowls of tea, pressed his fingers against one of the white porcelain tea bowls, and gently pushed it to Qin Pingon. This tea set on the table comes from the Longzhou Kiln Supervision and Administration Bureau. Less than a quarter of an hour. Qin Pingon went back to the bow. Only a lonely King Dolly was left, staring blankly at the tea bowl in front of him. Zhao Yu has been waiting for Qin Ping's return and asked in his heart, "The other two sword repairers?" Actually, when Zhao Yu first went to see Qin Pingon, he was not without worry, but he was inevitably worried that Qin Pingon would want to complete the immortal sword tie-by. Qin Pingon said, "Sword repairing Lu Kai is wild and wild." Zhao Yu frowned and said, "How can it be brilliant?" Qin Pingon shook his head and said, "I don't know. You can ask yourself in the future." Now he is practicing in Daxuandu. He is already a sword cultivator. Zhao Yu smiled bitterly. Now it's the Jade Pure Realm. You let me fly to the Qingming world. It's better to wait for Mr. Bai to return to Howren for things about the Year of the Ox. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Since I can return home from Wuxia world by an exception, I might be able to travel to Qingming world for an extraordinary journey." Zhao Yu choked for a while. It's really uncomfortable to chat with this guy who likes to hold grudges. Zhao Yu said politely, "Go back to the capital together?" Qin Pingon shook his head and said, "Going south to visit a few places again." Zhigui looked indifferent, squinted a pair of golden eyes, looked down at Qin Pingon and said in his heart, "You will disappoint you now." Qin Pingon raised his head and looked at the woman with sleeves in both hands. He didn't explain anything. He didn't have much to chat with her. But when he heard Zigui's words, Qin Pingon smiled instead. Leaving hometown for at least these years and wandering around with Song Jisun, she still did not disappoint Mr. Qi after all. During the war, instead of turning to the wild world, she took the initiative to leave the land and fought with the old throne Fei Fei, and stopped the other party's magical powers that tried to flood the old dragon city, so that she was moved to the mountain. The ancestor Zhu was tired of taking the lead. Recommend an app which is comparable to the old version of the book-chasing artifact, and can change the entire source book. After the war ended, I never rashly went to Guishu trying to stand on my own in the unrestrained barren world. I didn't fight with Mrs. Tantan in Lushwiking for the title of the Lord of Water Transport. No matter what I thought, I didn't make a big fuss and tore my face with the Confucian temple. The most important thing is that she did not cheat Song Jisun. Since she was in Niping Alley and could steal Dragon Chi from Song Jisun, now she can also feed Dragon Chi back to King Songmu. Once she does this, it will affect the luck of the continent. It is very likely that it will lead to the fact that the Song family of Dolly has 2 points in one country, and finally a situation of confrontation between the north and the south. Qin Pingon turned around, stretched out his sleeves and said goodbye to the armored general. Zhigui waited until the guy left and went back to the house and found that Song Jisun was a little bit unwilling, so he just sat down and asked, "Didn't we agree?" Song Jisun didn't say a word and was silent for a long time. He stood up and said, "Don't go to the capital, go to the wild world. Desui Mountain Cliff Academy. Senior brother Mao has stepped down as the deputy mountain lord, and after the Confucian temple discussion he was no longer the Xianxia of the Great Sui dynasty and also served as the mountain lord of the academy, but a new mountain lord from another continent came. Qin Pingon appeared on the top of the mountain called Dongshan in the academy, standing on the top of a big tree branch, overlooking the palace. The former Prince Zhou Xian was already the new emperor of the Sui dynasty. At that time the small town was mixed with dragons and fish. The first bag of gold and copper coins that Qin Pingon got was, strictly speaking, the bag of money he got from Zhou Xian plus the 2 bags that Gukan left for him, just enough to make up 3 kinds of gold. Refined copper coins, 1 bag each for offering money, greeting spring money and winning money. The 3 bags of gold and copper coins were actually a chance that Qin Pingon had missed. It was the loach that was first given to Gukan. Later, when he met Uncle Li when he was discussing the price, he was given a first-come first-served basis. Xingxing grabbed the golden carp before Qin Pingon, plus a free Dragon King basket. After, the son of the Gao family in Yang County of the Great Sui dynasty, as a proton of the alliance between the 2 countries, came to the Dai dynasty and studied at the Linlu Academy of Piyun Mountain for many years. In Xianxia Academy, Zhou Xian often fished with Yu Lu. In fact, they are very familiar with Aquarius and Li Huai. Qin Pingon hesitated, but still did not go to the Desui Palace to find Zhou Xian. The new emperor, who had not been enthroned for a long time, was busy criticizing Zhu in the imperial study. The old eunuch, who was secretly called the internal minister of the 2 dynasties by the Desui officialdom, stood at the door, and then an enshrined monk saw His Majesty the Emperor, who seemed to be called Kai Jingshan. Qin Pingon is not familiar with him, and Cui Dongshan and Uncle Li seem to be very familiar with him. After that, I just went for a short walk by the lake in the academy, disappeared again, and continued to travel far. A large-scale Xianxia ferry port is located on the border of Nanjian State and Guyu State. The ferry boat berth is a large lake called Baochun Lake. Back then, according to Zhang Shanfeng's statement, in ancient times, there was a goddess who was in charge of the spring and took charge of the flowers and trees in the world. As a result, a big tree in the ancient Yu kingdom was always not punctual, so the goddess issued an oracle order to let this tree cannot be resuscitated, so it is extremely difficult to form a refined form, so there is a saying that later generations of elm bumps cannot resuscitate. If Qin Pingon remembers correctly, the scholar surnamed Chu in the south really only had 5 levels of cultivation. This is indeed extremely inconsistent with its age. The monk is on the mountain, and there is the saying about the false year and the full year, which is not the same algorithm as the age under the mountain. Then this ancient elm tree spirit is really a typical imaginary age of several thousand years, and the full year is very insufficient. At that time Qin Pingon read little and had a short-sightedness. At first he mistakenly thought that the other party was a child of the royal family of Guyu. Otherwise he should only rely on a Chu surname, plus the allusions mentioned by Zhang Shanfeng, and that the other party claimed to be from Guyu. Some guesses. The spirit of the world. As long as the refining is successful, the real name is very important. According to Master Zhaoling's thus method of interpreting characters, the Chu character is on the forest, and under the and is the foot solution. Double trees are forests, and there are feet under the trees. The ancient master of the country of Yu used this as his surname. Qin Pingon looked up at the sky over the ferry. Ancient Yu country, Damao Mansion. The surname of the ancient Yu kingdom is also Chu, and the ancient elm tree spirit, whose alias is Chu Mao, has been the national teacher of the ancient Yu kingdom for some years. At this moment Chu Mao was dining, a large table of exquisite delicacies, plus a pot of tribute wine from the palace, and 2 young maids waiting by the side. It is really a fairy living a fairy life. Looking at the thoughts he spends on eating, he knows that he is a particular person. Of course, this master of the National Normal University was still very polite back then. Wearing a snow-white armor made of a soldier's armor pill, he slapped his front breastplate vigorously, begging Qin Pingon to punch here. That was the first time Qin Pingon saw Bingjiajuan, and it seemed that it was still the royal storehouse of the ancient Yu kingdom. And Diyu, the ghost axe palace that Qin Pingon met later in Luzhou Beiju, are a number of heroes. One begs you and the other makes 3 moves. Qin Pingon stood at the door, slightly lifting the monk's atmosphere. Chu Mao sullen his face and sneered, "The visitor is a guest, why sneaky?" Without turning his head, continued to pick up the chopsticks. A cultivator of the cave mansion realm is not low, and he is courageous. At the door, a man in a blue shirt with sleeves with both hands appeared, smiling and saying, "Master Chu, don't come here without any problems." Chu Mao frowned slightly and turned his head slowly, but when he saw the figure of the man, the master of the National Normal University suddenly sweated like rain. It was the 2 maids who were serving meals with the masters of the National Normal University, and they didn't know the importance of their interests. I just thought that the man in the green shirt who jumped over the wall was so bold. He looked so handsome. Chu Mao had to hold the tabletop with one hand so that he could stand up slowly, step back a few steps, first straighten his clothes, and then draw out a jade card from his sleeve, hung it around his waist, and finally drew it to the bottom, saying, "Guyu country exercises qi." "Sure Chu Mao, I have seen sect Master Qin. Is lousy blind?" The previous scene of Xingyang Mountain was very happy, and he did not drink less. As for Chu Mao's typing nothing card issued by the Ministry of Criminal Affairs, it was of course the last class. It's just that Chu Mao broke his head and couldn't guess, what would such an unattainable sword fairy come to Xianxia Guyu? Qin Pingon drew out a casual card from his sleeve. "It's such a coincidence, I also have one. I never thought that such an offering card is very useful." Chu Mao immediately turned the rudder upon seeing the wind and said, "It's something I can't imagine. I was fortunate enough to be a monk worshipping Dali with Qin Jianxian. Before that, I wished to be able to replace it with a second-class worship title. It's rewarding me with a first-class innocence card and I have to refuse it." Qin Pingon raised his foot and crossed the threshold, twisted his wrist, and the scarlet-colored flagon-like sword-raising gourd appeared. He smiled and said, "You said it yourself. In the future, as long as you pass by Guyu Kingdom, you must come to your side. As a guest, it's okay even if you go to the palace to drink. I also suggested that I had better pick a snowy night. Let us sit on the roof of the main hall and drink and enjoy the snow freely. Even if the emperor knew about it, we wouldn't drive people. At the beginning, Chu Mao claimed to be in a relationship with the emperor of Chu clan, which was to help each other and guard against each other. In fact, looking back, it was a very conscientious and honest statement. Chu Mao stood on the spot, startled and speechless like thunder and thunder. How could the sword fairy in Xianxia be the young man of the year? It has only been decades of effort. At that time I met young Jianxiu on a narrow road. How could both sides be considered? Fighting back and forth, right? Furthermore, you, the sword immortal master of the upper 5 realms, can't you let me a little severing spirit as a fart? Why bother to dig through the old accounts, which has lost the Xianxia's temperament in vain? Qin Pingon moved a chair and sat down and smiled with a maid. Excuse me girl, help me add a pair of chopsticks. Just as Chu Mao was about to reprimand the dumb goose that lacked the slightest eyesight, he found that the sword immortal looked at him with a smile but a smile. Chu Mao immediately said with the maid and Yen Yu, remember to bring a few more jars of good wine. After Qin Pingon took a seat, he asked casually, you haven't had any contact with the Daoist Bailu yet? It is hard not to remember the Daoist Bailu, who was one of Chu Mao's allies. Came quickly and ran faster. At that time, Chu Mao saw that the situation was not good, so he immediately called Qinshan God and Daoist Bailu to come to help out. He never thought that Daoist Bailu, who had just landed on the veranda, touched the ground with a little toe, and transformed into a white deer with the dust in his hand. The mount came and hurried to go even more hurriedly, put on a sentence, Mother Jianxiu. In fact, how can Qin Pingon be considered a sword repair at that time? A flying sword, with or without natal supernatural powers, is the top priority. On the 1st and 15th day of the new year, as the 2 flying swords with Qin Pingon for the longest time, until now Qin Pingon has not been able to find out the magical powers of his life. Chu Mao became more worried and sighed. Dadao Bailu, who was injured a little in the previous battle, is now wandering in other continents and he is relieved. He said that after walking through the Hauranjuzhou he must go to the Great Wall of Jianqi. When I watched and opened my eyes, I thought I was cheeky. I wanted to toast the sword immortals who died in battle. The Daoist also said that he didn't know how good the Great Wall of Sword Qi was before, and waited until such a time when the fairy master said death on the mountain. Only after I died and it was still a big battle I realized that the Great Wall of Sword Qi, which I thought could not be a little bit of a relationship, turned out to have helped Hauran keep the peace of the world for thousands of years. How courageous and difficult it is. In fact, when he returned to the capital of ancient Yu country, Chu Mao once sent a group of assassins, 2 pure martial artists, and 2 Yamazawa Yeshio to assassinate the young sword fairy. As a result, clay cows entered the sea, meat buns beat dogs one by one. No reply. So for so many years, Chu Mao has not gone to the Rouge County of Tsai country to take revenge. Qin Pingon asked with a smile. With the great master of Chu, why didn't you take refuge in the wild demon clan back then? Chu Mao smiled. It's a spirit, not a beast. Qin Pingon raised the wine bowl. Let's take one. Chu Mao hurriedly held the cup in both hands, waiting for the sword fairy to drink first. Then one suddenly raised his head and drank all the wine. Chu Mao was filled with wine again and quickly said something good and easy to obedient. If Qin Zhenxian had not had his own mountain top, he would not be able to get out of it. It would be better than Fengshui Temple Wei Great Sword Immortal is so chic. Otherwise I went to the Great Wall of Sword Qi with Qin Jiangxian's aptitude. He must not be inferior to Wei De Jiangxian at all. Qin Pingon raised the wine bowl, leaned forward, bumped the wine glass in Chu Mao's hand and smiled. It should be settled for grievances and grievances. After drinking wine today it is all over. But there is one thing, thank you. Means to be a baggage fast, pick up money and open the door. The young sword fairy didn't say anything and of course Chu Mao didn't dare to ask more. Finally, when the young sword fairy left with a smile, Chu Mao still had the illusion of being a world away. A secluded hill near a mountain shrine with a wide view, suitable for enjoying the scenery, 3 women, covered with Zhang Keiguo lichen, filled with wine and various pastries and fruits. An old saying about the rivers and lakes, the beauty in the mountains is either a ghost or a demon. Of course, there is also the goddess who is most aspired by the fallen scholars. The girl was so happy that she rolled happily on the blanket. Haha, Everything is difficult at the beginning, but everything is not difficult at the beginning. Posted and finally developed. My old lady was finally lavish, and finally I didn't have to send someone to look at people's faces. It was Wei Wei, the goddess of the mountain, who brought 2 temple mates to drink here. In the years when I was just promoted to the mountain god empress, all my family resources were spent on the construction of ancestral temples. How can I look at how wealthy and how to spend money? I have no experience at the beginning. When I was used to cutting paths and robbery, I knew how to be the goddess of the mountain. Isn't it the first thing that the yellow girl sits on the sedan chair, so I didn't even think about saving some flowers. It was really embarrassing and outrageous, so I had to borrow incense from Qinghuang temporarily to maintain the beauty of the landscape. Because the incense owed too much debt, the county Qinghuang called her grandma when he saw her. It was even worse than her, saying that he had tightened his pants. It's not a pretend to live with the belt. It's really exhausted by her, but Fu Qingwang is not kind enough. Close the door and go to the Duqingwang temple of the Yinming Regency in Yizhou. It is even a messenger in the yamen who can throw her at her face. Landscape officialdom. It's really hard to get confused. When Wei Wei was still a female ghost, she once complained that this world was difficult for people to live and ghosts to do. I never thought that I finally became the goddess of the mountain who enjoys incense, but I am still struggling everywhere. The turning point of things, after the visit of the sword Immortal Xianxia, the mountain temple began to operate from time to time. So that Wei Wei specially named the section of mountain road adjacent to the ancestral temple privately, which was called Fenshui Ling. Qin Pingon took advantage of Wei Wei's absence in the mountain temple, and sat on the long blue stone slab outside the temple. Really listening to the goddess of the mountain, and the 2 goddesses say that the plot of her trip to the capital was tortuous, and it was assumed that she was told by others. It turned out that the 3 of them carefully selected a scholar who went to Beijing to rush for the exam. It was indeed a waste of time to make people wait. If it weren't for Qin Ping's reminder, otherwise if they were just staring at the reading seeds in their mountain world, it is estimated that the mountain temple will be too tight to open the pot at this time. In the beginning, the scholar was not rare to walk the mountain road only to bypass the mountain shrine. What to do? Follow Qin Pingan's method, go down the mountain to support the dream. According to Wei Wei's estimation, Na Shizi's imperial examination system skills are not bad. According to his own cultural fortune, he belongs to the same Jinshi background. As long as you don't get muddled in the examination room, you can say that the examination is serious. The second-tier scholars of Jinshi are a little bit overwhelming, but it is not completely impossible. If you add Wei Wei's effort to donate the cultural luck, and light a red landscape lantern behind the scholars, you are indeed expected to be among the second-class scholars. Ku is the scholar who looks a little stubborn and crooked. At first Wei Wei's maid was reluctant, and she disliked that scholar is too ugly, saying that she really couldn't speak. So angry that Wei Wei grabbed her ears and scolded her for not being able to open her mind, just falling into a dream and even mouthing, "What kind of mouth? It is not for you to directly have a spring dream with him." After a crappy dream, it was for the first time that the scholar had encountered this kind of thing in his life. Otherwise Wei Wei felt terrible because of the flaws. Later she gritted her teeth and asked for a copy of the mountain and water genealogy, and the mountain went down as far as possible, deviated from the waterway, and took a careful trip to the capital. The so-called, a certain important minister of the temple by Qin Pingon did not say clearly, but both sides knew that Wei Wei was very familiar with this guy who had already been in power. When Wei Wei became the goddess of the mountain, the 2 sides had a tacit understanding of each other to draw a clear line. That guy is not a fuel-efficient lamp, and he doesn't miss old feelings. He goes around to play official accents. Any imperial examination is a major event in the country. It should not be interfered, and the rules are broken. Wei Wei, who was actually reluctant to mention Qin Pingon, was really unable to do anything, so she had to move out of the name of the sword fairy. The 3 characters Qin Pingon are simply the best panacea in the world. Although the guy only said, "Don't hope too much," at the time. However, Wei Wei still has this kind of human affection and sophistication. The scholar's background is a Jinshi, and he is sure of it. As for the top 3, Wei Wei really didn't dare to hope as long as he didn't make the bottom of the Jinshi. As a result, the scholar directly won the top 2 ranking, and of course the scholar was dreaming. Wei Wei and the 2 maids, after hearing the great news of this day, are actually the same. The Jinshi titled on the gold list was free without saying anything, rushing to the mountain temple, worshipping incense and bowing his head, tears in his eyes and extremely pious. It was at that moment, watching the curls of the essence of incense in the temple with his own eyes, Wei Wei suddenly felt a hint of understanding in his heart. It seemed that he understood a series of truths instantly, and truly understood how to act as of mountains and rivers. Qin Pingon sits on the bluestone bench next to Gu Song, holding a sword gourd and drinking slowly. Wei Wei, with a big laugh, our son Qin, who is pitiful and cherishing jade, said that those black words are more smooth than we are, it is really unfavorable. Casually talked about the deeds of the landscape travel notes. Wei Wei burst into laughter. Qin Pingon rolled his eyes. Don't know her in general. Sure enough, many fist-sized red lanterns were hung in the mountains, waters and territories surrounding the temples. These are the symbols of the protection of the mountain gods, and they are small and exquisite. There are both large gated households and poor alleys in the market. A good cause, as long as it can really bloom and bear fruit, it is possible to bloom. Everything goes smoothly and everything goes smoothly. On the border between the two countries, there are no four evils in the water country. It is a land of mountains and rivers. There are high mountains and mountains suitable for exploring the secluded area, and there are also easy places for enjoying the scenery. Otherwise Wei Wei would not choose here as the site of the ancestral temple. Plus there are many weird and strange anecdotes and landscape stories here. There is also an official road within the boundary of the ancestral temple. There are more people in the arena, scholars traveling, businessmen walking darts, 3 teachings and 9 streams, and there are more and more incense in mountain temples. A great pilgrim who is devout and faithful to the Buddha came to the temple and donated a considerable amount of sesame oil. So Wei Wei built a temple on his own land boundary. It was not large in scale, but he also specially invited temple blessings to renovate the dilapidated Buddha statues that had been brought together early, or put gold or painted them, in short, donated by the big pilgrim. Money, a couple of silvers, are not greedy for ink. And the big pilgrims in that state city made a special trip to choose the 15th day of the first lunar month to burn the first incense, and waited here on the 14th day. After seeing the temple he was very satisfied. Rich people may be confused about other things, but it is the most difficult to be fooled when it comes to making money and spending money. So at a glance I can see that the mountain temple is exquisite and generous, so I donated a large sum of silver to the mountain temple. It's a courtesy exchange. Wei Wei was a ghost. It's not that she has never seen money. He has dealt with him all the year round. Most of them are fairy money, but the incense is really not convertible with fairy money. The big pilgrim with a humble appearance was actually just an ordinary master who made real money from the mountain, but he said a sincere truth at the time, but Wei Wei remembered deeply. In fact, I am not doing good deeds and giving money to others, but other people giving good destiny to me. Dali Companion Capital Luo Jing. His Majesty the Emperor has never visited the accompanying capital. The old Shangshu Lu Qingfeng from the Ministry of Rights of the accompanying capital is very old and sick, and has not been to the Yamen for a long time. In fact, many dynasties have more precedence in the 2 capitals, 3 capitals and even Pei capital. Now Lujing's Yamen, not only the Ministry of Rights but also other Yamen, have officials suggesting that the 2 capitals of the north and the south are both capitals, regardless of priority. The undercurrent is surging. 2 minds, 1 argument. Today the old man heard a long-lost address of Mr. Lu, opened his eyes, stared at the uninvited guest who appeared out of thin air, struggling a little, nodded and laughed. Compared with the formality of the past, now it is much more arbitrary. Yes, good thing, just sit down. Lu Qingfeng sat up, took a pillow and leaned against him. There is actually a maid over there in Yuanj. Qin Pingon found a chair, held it gently and sat not far from the bed with his hands on his knees and said softly, Mr. Lu, just lay down and talk. Lu Qingfeng smiled and said, I have to lie down in the future, don't worry now. Qin Pingon laughed blithely. Lu Qingfeng pointed to the case of the bookcase. A court, how to manage corrupt officials. Needless to say, a country is the most important thing besides fighting 2 things, and we have done a great job in this aspect. However, Dali has done a great job. Well, some upright ways of being an official are relatively unremarkable. I have a pen to write and it's difficult to write, so I have to take advantage of the fact that I'm still alive, and am still able to dictate, so I can give someone a ghostwriter and quickly toss and make a mistake. Officials don't ask for money, they just use it for their own sake and act fiercely. It's not the golden mean taught by sages. Qin Pingon nodded. I once saw a similar statement in a small collection of travel notes, saying that corrupt officials only account for 30% of the country, and 70% of such troubles caused by innocent officials. That's not an exaggeration, but this is also a matter of reason. If you don't say a few strange things, who will listen to it? By the way, I have read that booklet and helped a woman change her name. Cui Huan is not as elegant as Huan Cui. Qin Pingon smiled knowingly, nodded slightly and said, "It turns out that Mr. Liu has really read it. The travel note has not sold much in Ao Pingzhou, and it has not been engraved and reprinted a long time ago. It can be seen that this Liu Laoshang's book is mixed and has good memory. Probably this is the so-called good knowledge, not to mention the old man is not a gas trainer. The fastest way, but the people in the book help this prostitute get out of the sea of suffering, both public and private, step by step without dripping?" Qin Pingon still nodded. As Mr. Liu said, it is true. Lu Qingfeng smiled and said, "Do a good thing so that the beneficiaries have no troubles. Even if it's just a matter of books, you and I are like spectators. It's a bit of comfort to turn the book to this point." Qin Pingon can only continue nodding obediently. Lu Qingfeng was silent for a moment and said, "Lu Qingshan and Lu Boqi, Mr. Laochen will take care of them a lot in the future." Qin Pingon said, "Mr. Lu, don't worry." Lu Qingfeng smiled and said, "In case of some accidents you can't take care of it and you don't need to feel guilty. If you can't do this, just forget it. Don't worry about each other, you don't have to worry about it, I just don't let it go. Heart." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "You can rest assured." Lu Qingfeng glanced at Qin Pingon, jokingly said, "Sure enough, it's better to go up the mountain to practice as a god." Qin Pingon hesitated to speak but stopped. Lu Qingfeng waved his hand, knowing what the young sword immortal wanted to say. "I am a weak scholar who can bear a little bitterness, but it is a pity that I can't bear the pain. What flesh and blood is peeling off, it is just thinking about it. If I think about it, my scalp is numb. Besides, I don't have that idea. Even if there is a shortcut to becoming of mountains and rivers, I will not take it. If others don't understand, you should understand." Qin Pingon no longer persuades. After a few coughs, the old man suddenly called out, "Qin Pingan." Qin Pingon said, "Mr. Liu?" The old man looked at the sword fairy on the mountain, who was still young. He turned the book so he could see the most knowledgeable page. He closed his eyes and muttered, "The world is overturning and my heart is clear." Sword of Coming Chapter 870. Jiang Mountain, passing the Yunlu. Rain and clear weather, the weather is fresh. In the Bailedu outside the mountain, clumps of reeds have bloomed, and the rice on the terraced field is golden. The several hills of Xingyang Mountain that are farther away seem to be relatively busy. There were no guests in that familiar-shaped room. Qin Pingon went to the house, moved a wicker chair to the observation deck and sat in the observation deck, overlooking the nearest Qinggu Peak, gently shaking the raised sword in his hand. Some things are difficult to quit once they have started, such as who they like or drinking. At the wine table, Qin Pingon has seen many people's feelings in the world. Drinking can make the few speakers become talkative, can make people who like loud speakers whisper, can make people smile but teary eyes without knowing it, and can turn an old man into a child. I don't know what his chief show will be when he arrives in the barren world and how much noise he will make. A piece of willow leaf cuts the fairy. As for Jiang Shangzhen's fate, Qin Pingon never asked. Cui Dongshan raised his mouth casually, saying that Zhou's chief Feijian had a very high rank and unparalleled edge, and he could be rated as the first class in the Summer Palace. He crossed the mountains and ridges, crossed the river and broke the armor. More surprisingly, Anai Yuerong, who was supposed to go to the border of Zhongyuer in Dei, was actually inside the inn at the moment, as if he was checking the accounts. Anai Yuerong was aware of the Qi vision here, and immediately put down the account book that became more and more sad, and quickly rushed to investigate the reality. Before she left, she was still praying for blessings silently in her heart. Don't be that person. Don't be that person. Maybe it's because I'm not going to burn incense in the temple on weekdays. I'm afraid of what will come. Anai Yuerong turned sideways and gave a blessing to the uninvited guest. She hesitated for a moment, thought about it, and deliberately used a more outlandish name. I have seen Master Chao. Qin Pingon turned his head, raised the sword-raising gourd in his hand and said, "First of all, I have to congratulate Master Anai, as everyone's hope is returned as the god of wealth of Xingyang Mountain sect." Anai Yuerong hurriedly regained her blessing again. really want to care about it, she can be promoted to the third in command of the next sect in the future, and I really want to thank this lost mountain sword fairy for making a big fuss. Otherwise, 1 carat and 1 pit can get her turn in the Qinggu Peak Dragon Gate realm, who is not a sword repairer and occupy an important position in the next sect? Beautiful things that I can't even dream of. She, the former treasurer of the Cloud Tower, is not a sword repairer like senior brother Wei Yueshan. The 2 senior brothers and sisters who seemed to be close to each other in the past are now too close, and the tribulations that almost destroyed the sect are shared. Let these brothers and sisters really do it. Before Ni Yuerong left the sect, the 2 parties had a sincere conversation in private that they had never had before, made up their minds and supported each other in the future. Wei Yueshan sits in Qinggu Peak. She is now in charge of the money in the next clan. In the future I will take care of my own Feng Tu as much as possible. Ni Yuerong cautiously said, the next case has not been finalized yet. Qin Pingon smiled and said, Xingyang Mountain is a well-known friend all over the world. This is a trivial matter. Ni Yuerong doesn't seem to be embarrassed. Year after year he has been dealing with people and welcoming things, and his face has long been as thick as the overlapping account books. Qin Pingon was puzzled. Why is Ni Xianxia still passing by the Yunlu? Accordingly, the preparations for the next clan are complicated. As the person who settles the accounts and manages the money, Ni Yuerong is a new official who should be the most inseparable. Ni Yuerong looked in a trance and had some unreal feelings as if she was politely pulling the house, but she was here before when Qin Pingon had an appointment with the Lord Zhu Huang. She did not dare to breathe. At that time the 2 sides sitting opposite each other, the 2 overlords, anyway she didn't dare to take a second look. When Ni Yuerong heard the question she immediately converged her mind and answered carefully. Returning to Master Chao's words, Yuerong has something to do temporarily this time, and she needs to go to the Zhongzhou Shirtang. Regarding Xianxia's business, I hope Sovereign Zhu will be able to take an idea because the price given by Yunxiu Mountain. Don't say anything specific, I'm an outsider, don't break the rules. Qin Pingon waved his hand, stopped Ni Yuerong's words and said casually, it seems that the inn's business has become a bit deserted. Ni Yuerong just gave a soft hum, she didn't dare to sneer. Why the business is sluggish and there are so few customers? Who is to blame? Of course she is the treasurer who doesn't know how to make money. Otherwise I still blame this courteous Master Qinshan. Things that don't make sense. The first suzerain of Xingyang Mountain's future next sect was the sword repair Yuanbai of the old Zhuing dynasty. Because there had been a questioning sword with Fengliu and Yellow River, Yuanbai injured the Dao, no accident, the old Zhu of the past, one of Ying's double walls. A genius sword repairman, his sword will stop in the nascent soul realm in this life. Bamboo Emperor is indeed a tolerant person. Yuanbai once was on the way to observe the ceremony. Under all eyes he openly declared that he had retreated from Xingyang Mountain. Of course, it is only a so-called next sect, as Ni Yuerong said. I still dare not say that it is a certain thing. After such a turmoil of observing the ceremony, there were more accidents. During the previous discussions at the Confucian Temple in China, Song Chongjing asked the Confucian Temple for at least 3 additional quotas for the sections. Among the candidates for the sects in Ao Pingzhou, in addition to this Xingyang Mountain, there is Yunxiao, who lacks only 1 monk of the upper 5 realms. Mountain, an ancient Buddhist temple located near Yendang Mountain, and Longqiu, Lu Chen's disciple Chao Rong's Taoist temple in the past years. And the gods hope that there will be 1 more next sect, plus the Changchun Palace, the local immortal residence of Dai. Feng forces are now vying for these 3 places. Originally, Xingyang Mountain had the most hope to add a Zhou Xian mansion. Don't look at the Emperor Song Mu of the Dai domain, and deliberately obstructed the matter, and put on a posture that was not discussed at all. In fact, it was singing with His Majesty the Emperor Dai with a red face and a white face, so that the monks of Xingyang Mountain will not be too ignorant, so that the tail will not be too big and the future will be difficult to restrain, and it will allow Xingyang Mountain to spit out more authentic sect heritage, and at the same time it can dispel the grievances of part of the immortal mansion on the mountain, especially the old-style Zhong prefix to the Song clan of Dali, who are working hard to support Xingyang Mountain. In addition to 3 kills with 1 stone, the Dali court also hit a backhand. It is not how the Dali court favored Xingyang Mountain, but the Song family of Dali and Beipingzu, who needed to gather more kendo air transport that was originally scattered across the continents of mountains and rivers. So Xianxia created the next sect, but there is not much suspense. In Qin Pingan's view, on the contrary, Yunxia Mountain, which has always had the best reputation and highest voice, is the least likely to formally join the ranks of the sect. It is not only the lack of a Yupu realm who sits on the top of the mountain, but that Dai has a more profound perspective. Plan. Xianxia Academy and Linlu Academy have all been among the 72 academies of the Confucian Temple. In addition, a temple has become one of the sections. Then the three religions of Confucianism, Buddhism and Taoism will truly take root in Aquarius Island. You can gradually stabilize and get on the right track. The most important thing is the Songjiao Patriarch Sandao and Aquarius Island can get a greater gift of gas luck. I believe these have long been within the established plan of the brother Cui Huang. Qin Pingan considers himself like a chess player, but he memorizes some so-called clever hands and stereotypes, and puts them together on the chessboard, which is better than dismantling and cutting and shorter than sewing and gluing. This is also a ceremony to observe the Xinjiang Mountain. Qin Pingan must be at the root of deliberate action, because he must let himself take the first-hand advantage and he must take the lead on the chessboard. So compared to the brothers Tui Yang Jingzhuzhong and Wu Shuangjiang, they are far behind. Human feelings are practiced unconsciously and scheming is so convincing. Song Jisun in Mud Bottle Alley is actually growing up. It is said that there are several landscape diaries in Zhongtu Shenzhou, and they have all begun to specialize in the young people of Lizhu Cave. After the rain, shoot shoots, grow sturdily and cultivate bamboos into forests. Only then Niuerong mistakenly thought that Qin Pingan said that the creation of the next sect was a trivial matter. He was ridiculing Xinjiang Mountain and sprinkling salt on the wound. In fact, that is really a trivial matter. Of course, the prerequisite is that Xianxia should stop being a demon by himself, begging for help, begging for money. Jianxiu obediently joined the army, served as a monk with the army, followed the Dali cavalry to fight in the wild. Then the next thing, naturally it will happen naturally. It's not that Niuerong is not smart enough, but because the Cloud Tower and Qinggu Peak are not high enough, even if the monk is standing on the top of the mountain he can't look far away. The real accident was actually Qin Pingan's determination to let Xinjiang Mountain die out on its own within a few hundred years. For example, the site of the lower mountain sect of Luopa Mountain was chosen at the boundary of Zhongyue on Aquarius Island instead of Tongyi's Hao. Yangshan is tit for tat, then the latter will soon become a source of water sitting in the sky. Qin Pingan is temporarily unable to compete with the smartest people in the world, but it is more than enough to deal with the old sword immortals like Xu Huang and Yan Chu who like to sit and watch the sky. Niuerong asked, "Master Chow, allow me to prepare some drinks and fruits?" Not long ago she got a square-inch object from the Patriarch Hall, called Shifengking, with the scroll with the white jade shaft in it. In fact, there was one at Qinggu Peak in her own house, but the brother is the master of the peak. It's her turn. According to the ancestral example of the first-line peak, all the recorded treasures of the mountain gate are only used by the ancestors and still belong to the ancestral hall. Just like the previous fairy Su Jia who was broken by the Yellow River in Fenglei Garden, she had to return the priceless sword gourd before she went down the mountain sadly. Qin Pingan declined to say, "You don't need to be so polite. I'm not here to catch the autumn wind, I just pass by." In the field of vision, the peaks of Xinjiang Mountain after the rain have different scenery, and there is even a rainbow hung between the Shuilong Peak and Yujiao Peak, which are relatively rich in water transport, which is a fairy-like picture. First-line peaks, large and small solitary mountains, fairy backsword peaks, full moon peaks, Chilling Mountain, Shuilong Peak, Baiyun Peak, Pianju Peak, Cheongji Peak, Yujiao Peak, Xiu Peak, Qinggu Peak. This is the first hostile sect of Luopa Mountain. Xia Yuanqui's Full Moon Peak and Qiu Lingshan, which was strictly ordered by the Emperor of Bamboo, Xia Yunsui and Tao Yanba, two old sword immortals, one Yupu and one Yuanying, really formed an alliance. Qiu Lingshan's vitality was greatly injured. Tao Yanba himself resigned as the of wealth in the sect, and declared that he had thought about it behind closed doors. Shilongfeng Yanchu resigned as the ruler of the ancestral hall, and transferred to the power of the ancestor. This is regarded as a mere exchange of benefits. Xia Yuansui, who had the highest seniority, replaced Yanchu's discipline, and anyway he didn't take the advantage of nothing. Leng Qi, the female ancestor of Qiang Zifeng, has retired and thanked her guests. Now Yifeng is close to closing the mountain. Before Ling Qi's retreat she handed over a lot of affairs to Liu to take care of it, that is, the first interview with Lu Xianyang. Woman's sword, repair of the sword. As for Yu Jiao, the master of Yu Jiao Peak, the young and promising golden core sword immortal, it is estimated that he will never have the heart to ask Longquan sword sect about the sword in his life. Situ Weining, who was born in Full Moon Peak, did not hesitate to become a ghost, but left like that. Before and after his death, she had always been infatuated with Li Tuanjing in Fenglei Garden, but she did not know that Li Tuanjing was reincarnated and she was far away in front of her. It was the genius boy who was brought up the mountain by Jiu Minetawan. The Emperor Bamboo suddenly made a rule. During his tenure as the sovereign of Xingyang Mountain, Yixianfeng will no longer set up the post of protecting the mountain from now on. Qin Pingon shook the red wine gourd and smiled. I have to stop talking. Please trouble master and I to go to the wine cellar to get 2 jugs of wine. And I Yuerong left immediately and took the wine. Don't dare to neglect, go and return. And I Yuerong brought 2 pots of Chongchun fermented wine that had been collected by Yunlu for many years. Qin Pingon, who had been sitting on the wicker chair, only took 1 pot of wine, waved his sleeves and put a chair in the house. Moved to the viewing platform. And I Yuerong thanked him, and after taking her seat she uncovered the mud seal of a pot of wine and took a sip of the wine. Qin Pingon shook the jug, put it to his ear, listened to the hops and then smiled. It's real wine, but it's a pity that I ran a lot. New hatred and old hatred, new wine and old wine. Maybe after some new hatreds have become old hatreds accumulated for many years, they will also run alcohol, and the weight will be reduced every year without knowing it. But there was also a bit of resentment, as Chief Shou said, it was like that old turtle's mouth, biting it tightly and not letting it go. Qin Pingon suddenly asked, is there anyone sneaking to destroy the stone steel standing on the border on the side of Xingyang Mountain? And I Yuerong's heartstrings tightened, and as expected when he returned to Xingyang Mountain this time, Qin Jianxian had come to Xianxia to ask his guilt? Is it fine to drink by yourself? It's just that the next half of the monument erector said something that Ni Yuerong could not think of breaking his head. The monument has to stand there for a long time. This is the rule set by Luopa Mountain and Xingyang Mountain. To happen outside of this, you don't need to be too nervous about anything. For example, if you are broken by someone, you will re-establish the monument. Anyway, I don't need to spend money. Just don't delay the time for too long. If you lose too much, you just need to move back to the original place. Handwriting if is erased with sword spirit, remember to re-engrave it. And I Yuerong had to quietly agree. Qin Pingon drank the Chongchun fermented wine that he had tasted for the first time and said with a smile, if you Zhengyangshan are worried that I will find a cause and take the opportunity to make trouble, so I deliberately punish someone heavily, especially if I was ruthless and what interrupted my disciples. The Longevity Bridge in Beijing, if you remove the name of the mountain and water genealogy, drive down the mountain etc., it will be avoided. And I Yuerong's thoughts changed sharply, and she did not dare to accept it immediately. Of course, she was worried that the Qingshan sword fairy was saying something ironic. Qin Pingon doesn't matter what Ni Yuerong's thoughts are. When I turned back, Master Ni Xian helped me give me a message to the Emperor of Bamboo, and said that these motivated young people are probably the future of Xingyang Mountain. And I Yuerong quickly glanced at the side face of the young sword fairy with a look that didn't seem to be fake. She quickly lowered her head to drink, a little confused, feeling ridiculous. For some reason she felt that the Lord of the Fallen Mountain looked like her own righteousness. Is Yangshan's suzerain? Qin Pingon continued. Of course there are many accidents on the road of cultivation. You can't blindly be young and energetic and always take mistakes to poke Lozi as your ability. For example, one of the passionate leaders of Xingyang Mountain will sneak to the side of Luopa Mountain one day. Ruthless, insidious tricks you can't escape and then fight to death. Those of you who are elders on the mountain, it is best to avoid it if you can avoid it and stop it if you can stop it. Otherwise something like that really happened. Xia Yunsui, the new leader Xia Yunsui, personally went to our Luopa Mountain to collect the corpse, and then returned here with a certain sword repairman from Luopa Mountain and received a gift in return. As for Xingyang Mountain, Jianxiu rushed to Dali Longzhou, upright climbing and asking about the sword in Luopa Mountain. Let's say another thing. And I Yuerong silently wrote down these important matters, and then she made her own mind and took out the scroll from the square inch, planning to find a cause, reluctantly cut love and Luopa Shan, or in other words, with the young sword fairy in front of her, sell a beggar. Forge a friendship, a little bit of incense. Even if the other party accepts the treasure but doesn't appreciate it at all, it doesn't matter, she will treat it as a disaster. and has stretched out her hand not to hit the smiley person since ancient times. Qin Pingon did not squint, but seemed to have insight into the hearts of the people. He knew Ni Yurong's plan and smiled. Cultivation is not easy, and the money in anyone's pocket is not obtained by strong winds or flooding. Ni Yurong put away the scroll angrily, took the courage and asked her a question that she has always been puzzled by all these days. Sect Master Chen, why are we alone against Qinggu Peak and we have passed through the Cloud Tower? It's all. You're welcome? The same as a female monk. Xianxia Peak's Ling Qi is in a bleak situation, not much better than Tao Yanba's Autumn Mountain. Today Xianxia Peak is not a closed mountain than a closed mountain, and the ancestor of the peak Ling Qi is not a retreat. It's better than retreat. Qin Pingon lay on a wicker chair with sleeves in both hands. I just said that it's not easy to practice. It's not easy for a woman to practice in Xingyang Mountain. Then sat up. Qin Pingon looked at the quiet scenery on the side of the ferry. Some things are understandable, but I don't think you have done it right. I won't look down on you, but I have no pity for anything. Ni Yurong neither expressed gratitude nor said anything. She just stopped drinking, the woman with gentle eyebrows, her hands interlaced with her fingers, quietly, looking at the green mountains and white clouds in the distance. Qin Pingon was about to finish drinking the pot of Chongchun fermented rice in his hand, then left Xingyang Mountain, continued on the road, traveled to the next place and smiled. I didn't intend to say so much. If Master Anai is not here, I will go to the meeting at most. Go down to Shuilong Peak and thank the people. Refers to a certain genius brother of Shuilong Peak who is diligent and conscientious in managing Xingyang Mountain's information. Qin Pingon asked casually, have you thought about the name of the Xia Zone? Ni Yurong didn't think there was anything to conceal about this kind of thing, so she didn't hesitate to say, the meaning of the Zhuxiatang is to be named Huangshan Jianzong, but it has not been officially finalized, so it is tentatively decided. In the previous discussions at the frontline Fengzhu Shirtang, there was not much discussion about this matter. After all, there is no need to have a next sect. Not to mention that even if the next sect was created and permission was obtained, the name of the sect had to be read by the Dali Imperial Court first. If the Zhongtu Confucian Temple finally did not decide and nodded, it would have to change its name again. It is rumored that there are many precedents in the history of the Confucian Temple where the name of the sect failed to pass. For example, there used to be a Kendo sect in Luzhou and Beiju. At first, it was planned to name itself the First Sword Sect, but it was directly rejected by the Confucian Temple. Well, I changed my name to a less high-profile head office, so I gave the Confucian Temple a Second Sword Sect. As a result, a Confucian temple who sits on the canopy of Luzhou, Beiju, accompanies the saints and asks that Yupu realm Jianxiu, who is planning to start a school, is your mind flooded? Qin Pingon smiled and said, it can be seen that your suzerain has high hopes for this next sect. The next ancestral name is Huangshan. The bamboo is full of mountains. Of course, the meaning is good. Sovereign Zhu Huang, of course, also has two selfish intentions. One is to tell all the descendants of the two sects under the mountain that this next sect was created by him alone, and the other is Bamboo Emperor or Huang. And at the same time the mountain of Tuzhu can gather the Kendo air fortune that flows like water in the old Zhuing realm. Obviously, the Bamboo Emperor wants to help himself break the bottleneck of the jade in the future by relying on the Kendo air fortune of the entire lower sect. Immortal became the second fairyland sword repairman after Fengxue Temple Wei Dai Jiangxian. Like the Dragon Elephant Sword Sect built by Qi Tingji in Nanpasuazhou, and Master Wan's Longquan Sword Sect, as well as the Taihui Sword Sect on Luzhou in the north, and the Duckweed Sword Lake. These swordsman sects mostly carry a sword. The word prefix is not as simple as showing the identity, but to a large extent involves the matter of luck. Similar to the real name of the Yaozu, the gods of mountains and rivers were awarded the court, and they all pursued a famous name. The reason why the name of the next sect of Luopashen remains unresolved is that Cui Dongshan hopes that there will be a sword in the name of the next sect. The next sect in such a down-and-out mountain justifiably became the first Kendo sect of the mountains and rivers of Tonggishao in the south. Just like the Longquan Jianzong founded by Ruan Qiong, it became the first of Izhou Kendo. The time comes to heaven and earth are all in the same force, swallowing thousands of miles like a tiger. It's not a trivial matter. Longquan Jianzong was founded not long ago. There are already Lu Xianying, Xieling and Su Xiaoqiao. If you add Yulin and Lu Yu who have been transferred to Xingyang Mountain halfway, and with the support of the Dali court, They will help carefully select the embryos of Sword Fairy. Originally it was at most 200 or 300 years long. The swordsman will become a veritable swordsman with a very small number of sword repairs. Just like the name of the mountain, it is not appropriate to give a child a name that is too big, because I am worried that it will not be able to carry it, but I really want to take a big name. So most of the children will also be given a nickname that sounds extremely early. The elders in the family often shouted as a transition. For example, Tonggizong in Tonggishao is a typical mountain big name, named after a continent. Haoran Jiuzhou for thousands of years, many large sects so named in history have disappeared one after another, and finally only the Tongye sect remains. Then it was the wilderness attacking Haoran. In hindsight, the Tongye sect was the first to fall apart like a sign of the land sinking on the continent of Tonggishao. On the other hand, Sun Yuan, the old master of Yuguazong, traveled to Aquarius Island back then, and he did not hesitate to have a grudge with Wensheng, but also to choose the next sect to be located in Aoping Zhou Xian Lake. I have to say that he was very prescient. And the friendship between Jiang Shangzhen and Wensheng's lineage Qin Pingon prevents the two parties from becoming dead enemies. Probably this is the old-fashioned behavior of an old suzerain. And Ai Yuerong didn't know that a careless word of her could make the owner of Luopishan think so much. Qin Pingon drank wine in silence. And Ai Yuerong wanted to speak but stopped. Qin Pingon said, "Something?" And Ai Yuerong took a big sip of wine. After taking the courage of the wine, he changed the title of Qin Shanzhu as the beginning and whispered, "We Qinggu Peak, we have recently received 2 young sword repairmen. Among them there is a sword fairy embryo with excellent qualifications, who admires Qin Shanzhu very much. Really, it is not that Yu Rong deliberately approached him. That little girl really admires Qin Shanzhu's sword fairy style sincerely. She is our sect. Men just received a wave of sword repairs, so she missed the ceremony, and she was pure-hearted and would not think too much." The brother actually reminded her of this. The child did not listen, just as the wind in the ear, so that every time she practiced in addition to swords, "I have to learn some martial arts skills. I don't listen to how to persuade her." The brother treats her as a half-born girl, and I almost want to go to Biefeng to steal a few excellent swordsman books. I just hope she can. Practicing the sword well and strive to form the golden core within Jiazi so as to keep Qinggu Peak. In the early days of King Yufeng, relying on Ni Yurong's master Ji Yen, the incense love between the master of the mountain and the bamboo emperor was thrown to King Yufeng 1 or 2 swordsmen from time to time, but King Yufeng couldn't keep it, so much so. In the past 240 years, there hasn't been a sword cultivator in Qinggu Peak sitting on the top of the mountain. Together with Ni Yuerong and brother, they are destined to have no hope of forming a golden pill. Besides, the 2 of them are not sword cultivators, so if it weren't for the ritual change. According to the example of the ancestor of the first-line peak, there has not been a peak head repaired by the golden core sword for 300 years, and she will be removed from the name. Then she and her senior will be the biggest sinners who personally ruined Qinggu Peak. And Ai Yuerong suddenly noticed that her words were out of proportion. Excellent qualifications? Sword fairy embryo? I just want to say to her, but the young mountain owner of the downhill mountain next to me, will he find it extremely ridiculous after hearing this? Qin Pingon said helplessly, "Tell me what this does." In order to keep the incense of Qinggu Peak, Ai Yuerong wiped the sweat on his forehead and ignored it. She bit her scalp and said tentatively, "Yu Rong dare not think anything wrong. I only hope that if we pass Qinggu Peak again in the future, Qin the mountain master can give her some advice on swordsmanship, even if it's just a few words." Qin Pingon waved his hand and stood up. "Don't think about this kind of thing. The last time I asked Jianzhenjiang Mountain, I didn't think it was such a sinister landscape." Ai Yuerong sighed and had to give up. Qin Pingon looked at the terraced fields and asked for no reason, "Have you hit the rice?" Ai Yuerong shook her head and said, "I just saw it from a distance." Qin Pingon joked, "You can let the Qinggu Peak disciples go down the mountain to try this in their leisure time." Ai Yuerong seemed to have received an imperial decree. "I will discuss this matter with my brother when I look back, and include it in the King Yufeng ancestral precepts." Qin Jiangxian's remark seemed to be an understatement, but they casually said, "But in fact they must have a lot of meaning." Qin Pingon rubbed his eyebrows and said helplessly, "I'm just making a joke. You're really not afraid of being jokes by Biefeng." Ai Yuerong smiled sweetly, "Are we less jokes at King Yufeng? Don't care about the more. Maybe Qinggu Peak will be a pioneer in the future and Biefeng will have to learn something. Before Qin Pingon left, he put the empty hip flask in his sleeve and smiled and said, I hope I haven't drunk a pot of wine from Yunlu shopkeeper Ni in vain. Ni Yuerong just treated it as a joke and didn't care. In an instant, there was no more figure in the blue shirt on the viewing platform. Ni Yuerong was relieved. After a while, there was a cyan sword light going straight to the cloud tower from the first-line peak. The bamboo emperor fell to the ground, retracting the sword into its sheath. Ni Yuerong immediately bends down and salutes, I have seen the Lord. Are you crazy? Zhu Huang smiled and said straight to the point, dare to pass on the ancestor hall with flying sword under Qin Shan's his nose? It turned out that Ni Yuerong was going to help Qin Shanju to get the 2 pots of Changchun fermented rice. After a battle between heaven and man, he still used his own risk and secretly sent a message to the frontline peak with a flying sword and informed the Lord Zhu Huang. Ni Yuerong is anxious shouldn't he be offended by the Emperor Bamboo, so he just lost the 3rd place in the next sect in the future, right? Bamboo Emperor said, do you know that it was Master Qin Shan who was holding a flying sword and personally helped you deliver the letter to the first-line peak? Ni Yuerong was dumbfounded and frightened. Hey, let's not say that I can't eat, I'm afraid Qing Wufeng will be implicated. It's just why Qin Jianxian knew about it or took the pot of wine. Waiting to see her joke? Could it be that Qin Jianxian took the initiative to ask for a drink and was deliberately waiting for his flying sword to pass the letter? And why did the Lord Bamboo Emperor seem not angry but rather relaxed? The Emperor Bamboo looked at this woman who had not yet understood the key points and shook her head. Is this a silly person and a blessing? Ni Yuerong asked in a low voice. What did Qin Shanju just say to me? I repeat it with the suzerain. The Emperor Bamboo shook his head and went to the railing. With his hands folded, he looked at the Qinggu Peak. No, this is your own good fortune. Ni Yuerong looked embarrassed and said, but Lord Qin Shan has something to say, let me take it to the sect master. The Emperor Bamboo turned his head. Ni Yuerong waited for Lord Sovereign to speak. The Emperor Bamboo smiled and said, why wait for me to kneel down and beg you to open the golden mouth? The business of Qingfang is unique in Dalongshan Xinjia Ferry. The borders of dozens of countries in the middle of Beipingzu. As the final battle, the extent of destruction is actually much smaller than Qinping's imagination. In fact, the entire half of the mountains and rivers in the southern part of Aquarius Island are much better than the fragmented and devastated Tongya Island. The barren army was along the shoreline of Fuyao and Tongya continents earlier. The army crossed the border like shaving their heads. It was tragic and it could be said that there was no grass. After that, the troops scattered in Tonggishao and they passed through the border. They carefully searched all over the place. There were ruins everywhere. The corpses were everywhere. It was still terrible. Not spared, after crossing the sea to the north after the old dragon city fell, he went north to Beipingzu like a comb. It can be seen from this that the barbaric army tent has made up its mind to rely on the entire southern territory, abandon the plan of a quick fight and make a quick decision, and come to have a bitter battle of mutual exploitation with Dai, and each will add fuel to the battlefield. Just watch. Who can consume it? Look at the big Li cavalry that once gathered the power of a continent, whether it kills more enemies or kills more. King Bofang is still the same with 5 stories high, but the wood is new and newly built. Only the plaque and couplets are old. Presumably it must have moved north to take refuge in the first place, so I can't take too much. The wild monster race will of course not let this kind of extremely precious Xinjia ferry pass. Qin Pingon looked at the content of the couplet with a smile. Children are not deceived, our price is fair. Compare heart to heart and the guest officer will come back again. In the small wine shop of Jianqi Great Wall, the business experience is similar. There were 5 women waiting for business in the lobby. A young girl with elegant dresses immediately stepped forward and asked, does the son want to invite someone to appraise the treasure or buy the treasure in the store? Qin Pingon looked at a woman who happened to be here, turned his head to apologize to the girl and then smiled. I came to Guifang this time to find Mr. Hong. Let Tuiying lead the way. All right. Because in accordance with the rules of the shop, if the 5 women in the hall were not for their regular guests, there would be a sequence of who would show up and speak. The woman's shoulders were hung like cyan flying insects carved out of jasper. She hurriedly walked to the man in the blue shirt who named her to lead the way. She smiled charmingly with a little apologetic expression in her eyes. The son is? The last name is Qin. Qin Pingon explained with a smile. 20 years ago I came to King Fufeng with 2 friends. It's the old Mr. Hong you helped lead the way. It's just a woman who can't remember her life or death, but she has a stunned look and smiles. Master Chen's demeanor remains the same. In fact, at that meeting the man in front of him was still a sword-backed young man, and King Fufeng's business was good, and there were countless people coming and going. How could she recognize her no matter how good her memory was? Qin Pingon did not expose her polite words, and followed her all the way to the 2nd floor. The corridor has a large number of splendid lichens, a national specialty of colorful clothing, and the embroidery is excellent, but it is new. Qin Pingon asked, "How much snowflake money does this piece of lichen cost now?" Chuiying smiled and said, "The price has at least doubled compared with the previous years. It is very dark. Now Keiguo is relying on this and the cockfighting cup to help fill the national treasury. It really doesn't make much money." Qin Pingon knows that this is one of Dong Shuijing's many financial avenues. This fellow villager has one business purpose: to earn money from the rich. Chuiying gently opened the door and whispered, "Mr. Hong, the guest comes to the door." Qin Pingon was at the threshold, smiling and clasping his fists. "Mr. Hong, I'm seeing you again." Hong Yongbo was stunned and quickly got up. "Qin. Young master?" I originally wanted to respectfully call the other person Qin Jianxian or Qin Shanzhu, but Chuiying was on the side to avoid the taboo of landscape. The first time I met I was still a curious, slightly restrained teenager. We'll carefully look around. Of course it is not the kind of scowling look. At that time the young man who traveled far away in Hong Yongbo's eyes was at most a 3-level martial artist. He was on the way to martial arts and had just entered the room. When we met for the 2nd time she became a young man wearing a hat, a blue shirt and a sword, just like a ranger on the rivers and lakes. This time, it is the Zhongmen Mountain Lord of Luopa Mountain. Sure enough, the owner's vision is good. Only met once and was sure that this person was the young sword fairy who fought back Sulong in the territory of Susui country. At that time Hong Yongbo was still skeptical, but now it seems that the owner is indeed unique and his old eyes are dim. On the big table besides the small incense burner, there is also a copper-potted plant. A row of boys in green clothes sitting on the branches shaking their feet just can't help themselves. The old man said helplessly, "The little guys are having a temper with me." Qin Pingon had a soft expression, smiled and waved and greeted the green-clothed little people proactively. "Long time no see. I made up my mind anyway. If the little guy doesn't tell me today, I won't cross the threshold today." Fortunately the little guys are very face-saving, chirping and laughing. They got up one after another, politely, childish, innocent and said the festive words that made Qin Pingon always listen to them. "Welcome to our shop and our house. Congratulations to make a fortune." Qin Pingon smiled and crossed the threshold, turning his head and saying to the young woman, "Don't be busy here. Mr. Hong and I are old acquaintances. We will do some business and we will get red after the fact. It's always the rule to go. I have to trust Mr. Hong. The tea is no longer needed. I brought my own drinks and invite Mr. Hong to drink." Hong Yongbo nodded to her. She smiled sweetly, gave a blessing and said that she wished Qin Gongzi's dreams come true and wealth, and then she left. Qin Pingon did not close the door and went straight to the table, stopping the old man who was just about to move. "Old Mr. Hong, don't be polite to me. I know this well and I won't treat myself as an outsider." "The old gentleman is too polite. Does he treat me as an outsider?" Qin Pingon moved the chair by himself, and it was still the antique claret-red chair before. "Old people, young people, nostalgic." Hong Yongbo smiled and nodded, before he went around the table and took his seat again. Glancing at the open door, the old man was full of emotion. Back then he just raised a mouth casually. After so many years it's really memorable, not so good. Qin Pingon held back a smile and said straightforwardly, "Old Mr. Hong, really don't want to go to my side to help? Bao Zhai business at Nujiashan Ferry. The stalls are getting bigger and bigger and there is always a lack of a real steward. The 2 shopkeepers in Qilong Lane, Shi Rongruan and Jiasheng, are not suitable. Shi Ro prefers a stable life. As for the old fairy Jia, he is actually more suitable to be a second in command." Hong Yongbo waved his hand and said guiltily, "It's really impossible. It's definitely not that my old man deliberately took Zhou to raise his worth. It's just a business matter. In the final analysis I am still a man. My old boss had a great kindness in my early years and the young owner took over King Fufeng. After that he treats me not badly. The old man immediately laughed at himself. I'm a little bit ignorant to talk about these great principles with Qin Shanzhu. The old man was in Qingfufang, and when he dazzled his eyes he felt it was a matter of a few glasses of wine. He has been there for nearly 80 years. Qin Pingon took out 2 pots of Xianxia wine brewed in his own wine shop, handed it to the old man and turned it over with his wrist. There were 2 more wine glasses, 2 flower cups from Baiwafuti. He joked with the old man, "The owner but in the shop? I discussed this directly with her. If it doesn't work I will grab someone. If you are used to windfall, partial wealth and ill-gotten wealth, it is a drink to quench your thirst. The more money the greater the disaster. This kind of thing is better to be believed than to be untrustworthy." This is why Qin Pingon cares so much about the business of the 2 shops in Qilong Alley. As long as they are in Luopishan, Qin Pingon will go to Qilong Alley in person and check the accounts carefully on time, not even asking the 2 shops to hand over the books to Luopishan. Because only he who is the owner of the mountain really cares about this matter. Shi Rongruan, Jia Sheng and their 2 shopkeepers will follow suit, and will not be completely wrong just because of a few taels of silver and a few snowflakes in the account. Thing. Hong Yongbo's eyes lit up and he picked up the wine glass. This flower cup does not seem to be an imitation? This is similar to the pair of Qingshan bamboo chopsticks in the early years. They are all good things with a price but no market. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It's true or not? I can't guarantee that it was picked up anyway. If Mr. Hong is willing to change his words at this time, I will directly give a full set of flower cups as a meeting gift." Hong Yongbo stared. "It's not annoying, I can't say it, it's not a matter of joking with you. Qin Jianxian is so entangled, I really want to drive people. This wine glass has to stay." Qin Pingon looked around and asked, "Is there any new products in the shop? As for the Imperial Pine Smoke and Ink and the Shizai Tai, are both still there? Everything in the world is tied together. In many cases you must believe it if you don't believe it. It's better to believe it if you don't believe it. The piece of pine smoke ink has a relationship with Xinshui country, and it has a relationship with King Wei Dashan of Piyun Mountain." The reason why Qin Pingon didn't buy it back then was not because he felt sorry for the immortal money, but because he was worried that Wei Bo would be sentimental when he saw things. Time has changed. Now there is no such worry. Hong Yongbo first shook his head and then nodded. "There are a lot of good things but they are top-notch ones. Really there are none. I won't show them to Qin Jianxian. Fortunately the 2 items you mentioned are still there. I admire the owner more and more. These 2 things are not unsellable, but the owner deliberately asked him to keep them in the past, saying that if the sword fairy in green shirt comes back someday in the future, they can be used as a gift. Of course, giving favors does not mean giving away 2 things for nothing. There is no reason to do so. That rare copybook from the hand of the ancient Shu sword fairy, although it is a copy, the text is as beautiful as Chio Cicada's remnants, because it almost does not lose the original, so it has the reputation of the next authenticity. Hong Yongbo offered 5 small summers that year. Money, the young man was quite tempted but directly gave 3 words, "Can't afford it." In the end he used 5 grains of rain to buy that piece of goods, a complete set of 4 celestial masters cut ghost money. Hong Yongbo took out Yumohi copybook and said with a smile, "Just calculate it at the old price." Qin Pingon did not hesitate to take out the fairy money, which was refreshing and refreshing. The 2 sides said in the same voice, "Can I have something to add?" The old man laughed loudly and Qin Pingon didn't feel embarrassed either. Hong Yongbo shook his head and said, "It's still the old rules, nothing to add." After the 2 of them drank and chatted. Traveling from a long distance and returning to the hometown, people have a big vision but the hometown is small and the old one gets thinner. Life is short and there is a long way to go. The people's heart is dangerous and the wine glass is the widest. How much do you know about gathering and dispersing in the world? And take a drink slowly. Finally Qin Pingon drank and blushed. After leaving Qingfufang the last time I was walking with a horse on the ferry side, I also met 2 short yellow-faced children. In the end I spent 12 snowflakes from Qin Pingon and bought 3 from them. Such things: 1 party, eternal good fortune Wadong ink stone, a pair of old pit yellow frozen old seals and a shallow red bowl. If you follow the market price, of course you can't use so much snowflake money. It is estimated that the 2 children were taken advantage of, and as soon as they got the money they ran fast. The 2 light-footed children began to whisper after they ran away. Both of their immature faces were smiling. Qin Pingon did not feel that he had spent the wrong money. Just like the small town in his hometown back then, every time the strawshoe boy sent a letter he would fly to the next place. Qin Pingon had left those pessimisms at the head of the city of Hadao, and besides, all hope. What are you afraid of? The old ones can't go away, but the new ones can come again. Hope to be alive even further away from the original spring grass. Even if disappointment will pile up into mountains, hope will bloom again and again. Qin Pingon turned his head and looked at the third floor of King Fufang. There was a woman standing by the railing. She was the owner of King Fufang, who pretended to be a maid in the workshop, and a woman Jianxiu who deliberately concealed her own weather. When she saw Qin Pingon turning her head, she immediately turned around and walked into the house. After meeting the young sword fairy last time, he returned to the King Fufang and said a word with Hong Yangbua. At that moment he was fixed like a mud bodhisattva on a shrine. Qin Pingon retracted his sight and instantly traveled thousands of miles away. On top of a sea of golden clouds, he walked slowly, took out the copybook that he had just bought from his sleeve and laughed at himself. Because the young hidden official wearing a lotus crown in the wild world just made up his mind to ask Jiantua Yueshan. And the opening words of this Shizai Tai are the shared feelings of Qin Pingon, the current awe-inspiring and the wild. Shizai swordsmanship.